Good morning. So glad you could join us today. We are recording and we are going to have this available. So I know there are a lot of people. We only have 5 or 6 that are actually on live. Maybe more will join us, but we will have this available for others. So glad you could be with us today. Donna, let me know if people can't hear me, but hopefully it's sounding okay. Okay. So we are starting our technical assistance, and you'll have to be my clicker if you don't.
There you go.
And we're doing several face-to-face and virtual sessions of technical assistance. Because of the snow in Hazard, we had to cancel that face-to-face, but we will have other face-to-face meetings that anyone can attend. On Monday, we hope to be in Bowling Green at Greg. We will have on the 8th, the 15th, and the 22nd online technical assistance times as well. So that'll be made available to you. So those are ones where you can ask questions. Of course, you can always send in your questions to where you've probably been sending them already, kderfp@education.ky.gov. And we'll give you all of that information as well. Okay, so I'm Jackie Rogers. I am the program director for Striving Leaders. I went to a technical assistance session in DC just 2 days ago, and one thing I learned is that nobody has all the answers. I was really disappointed in that. I was hoping that we would learn all the things we need to know. So that's a very important part of what we're doing today, is finding out what is specific to district questions you have, things that we need to think about a little deeper. So please don't get too frustrated if we can't answer all your questions, but that is our goal. And the main goal of today and our role always is to make sure that you're as successful as you can be. So we have Jonna Rogers with us today, who is a grant writer and grant specialist extraordinaire. So we're very happy to have her with us. Lots of years of experience in this area. She does a lot of plain talk, which is great and very much appreciated. So we'll go ahead and get started. So one thing that I always like to point out is that this is a comprehensive literacy grant, and ours is called Fluence, KY Comprehensive Literacy Fluent, which stands for Framework for Literacy to Unify and Engage Networks of Teachers. That's a lot of words, but I think when we start talking about networks that teachers in Kentucky are in, you get it. It's sort of in your DNA at this point. We've had a lot of networks, whether inside our district or outside. We've done a lot of statewide networks, teacher leader networks, maybe in ELA or science, social studies, math. We've had other networks as well. So the Ellens, for instance. So I don't think that's a new concept. You're going to read this. Time out just a second. Jonna, I don't know if your mic is rubbing right there on your. Okay, gotcha. So I don't know what networks you've been a part of, but you're going to see that crop up a lot in our work. Not only in we're going to build literacy leadership teams, but we're also going to have networks of teachers that'll be a part of gathering evidence in schools and in their districts. So that's pretty exciting as well. We'll talk a lot more about that when it gets closer to that monitoring stage, but I think that's a really interesting concept of this grant. The theory is pretty simple: help schools and early learning providers create their own framework of success with comprehensive literacy. So one of the things right off the bat you have to know is comprehensive literacy is from birth to grade 12. And I hope you've read a lot on our webpage, on KDE's webpage. If you're ever looking for things, you don't exactly know where to go, just Google KDE Striving Readers or whatever it is you're looking for, and it'll usually take you right to it. But on that page, you can see a lot more about this, but it's very a simple thought that we're looking at this continuum of birth to grade 12. So that means we're going to have to address that in grant proposals. We're also going to have to address that particularly in our plans that we make, those literacy plans for the district and schools. So that's really the touchstone that we're always going to come back to, is comprehensive literacy. Comprehensive also means it's across the board. It's not an English teacher's job. It's literacy for all, birth through grade 12. Okay. So when you look on the U.S. Department of Ed's site, this is the goal that you see for striving readers. It's to advance literacy skills, including pre-literacy, so drawing back into that birth to age 5 group, reading and writing for students from birth to grade 12. Something that Kentucky does that you need to be aware of, and I think that you are, but I want to put this out, is that we also put other pieces in literacy, because we know that speaking and listening and language are also a part of this literacy definition broadly overall. So that's something you'll also want to address and be thinking about always. Okay. So the department was awarded $24.9 million. It's a lot of money, and we're very excited to have that. Meeting with the other states, some had a little more, some had a little less, and we're all working for that same goal. And 95% of the money will be going out to districts, and I like that even more. I love the thought that you're going to build a plan. Those that are awarded will have a solid plan that will be reviewed, and suggestions made and help given on these plans. And that's what's going to guide the way you spend your money, the way you do business. 5% will remain with us, and that's for all of the technical things that we have to do. Maybe some is travel, data collection, these kinds of technical assistance, and whatever kind of training we might offer. So that's how that's distributed. On the next slide, you see some earmark funding that you'll find for the district. So we do have categories. That early learning category, birth to age 5. If a district is awarded money, 16% of that, of the money they receive, the award, will be earmarked for this group. The bulk of the money ends up there in the elementary, K-5, with 42%, and then 42 also for middle and high. That's distributed equally between the two of those. So that's something that will also be a part of our accountability as districts to KE, is how we are accounting for this money going in those places. So obviously we'll talk more about that in those sessions, but I just want to make you aware that that is something very important that we'll be doing. So in Kentucky, when we wrote our grant proposal, just like you'll be writing yours, we had to come up with goals as well. These are our goals for Kentucky, that all young children are ready to read. I think all of us can agree that that's important. And if you look at Brigant's data or other assessments and screeners you may have, but we look at Brigant's and say about 50% of our students are ready for kindergarten. We want to improve that. We want all young children ready to read. Our second goal is about our elementary students, that they're excellent readers. So we're building on that foundation of them coming prepared. And middle and high school students are reading to learn, cross content. So not having to decipher the terms, not having to decode, not all of the things that they were learning in their reading, but rather are using their reading in their comprehension to learn their, for instance, science content and social studies and so forth. So those are our goals, and here are the way those are broken down a little bit more. If you're thinking about if all young children are ready to read, how do we decide if they're moving in that way? So you'll see something very similar in all of these. It's about what kind of gains are they making? Are we reducing? Well, we'll talk about the reduction here in just a second. But this is increase of 4-year-olds achieving significant gains in oral language skills. Of course, we talked about being K-ready upon arrival to feeder schools. And I think all of these, I know they do, have this last one of building self-efficacy of early learning providers. Some of them will talk about this self-efficacy of teachers. So that comes from really also the heart of this grant is about professional learning and building understanding, building confidence, building efficacy of these early learning providers, of teachers, principals, all those that are involved. The next one in elementary is broken down. Of course, we're going to start getting into some K-Prep data, but we're talking about those that meet proficiency, but also those that perform at novice to reduce that in reading. We also want to increase those that are reading and proficiency in grades 3 through 5. We're going to use the 2019-20. I mean, those are the goal dates for those. And again, increase self-efficacy of participating elementary school teachers. And for the middle and high school.
Oh.
That's okay.
There we go.
It's also just a little awkward talking to myself. So, but Jonna, please to jump in if you have something that you want to say. But this
we'll get into the back and forth later, I'm sure.
Yes,
so.
Yes. In the middle school and high school range, where we're talking about content reading, increase students in grades 6 through 8 who meet proficiency. That's K-Prep as well. We want to decrease novice. We want to, in high school, the exact same thing, and also build that self-efficacy. Haley asked, will these slides be available? Should have told you that already. Yes, they will. And also this recording will be available. They're not out there yet. We wait until all of our technical assistance sessions have happened. So we'll just go ahead and address that one. Okay. And please feel free at any time to ask questions through your chat. This one is a little blurry on the screen, but I think you probably have seen it in your RFA. If you have that, that's going to be a handy tool today to have in front of you so we can reference back and forth exactly where we're talking about. So something that is a little unique to Kentucky is that we chose to identify some models. I hate to call them programs because you know the difference in buying a program and instituting a model and implementing something. So what has to happen inside this grant in all places is that the participants choose models that are of moderate or strong evidence base. So there's research behind those. So if you imagine if you had to go out and pick, some people are doing that, and some have lessons learned that people spend a lot of time trying to pick the things. And we're really interested in getting started in learning and implementation. These are models that we have seen to be successful. We've used these in Kentucky, but there's also the research that's behind it. In that chart, you can see that the components that are actually covered, you'll see the moderate or strong connections there. Also, so you'll see 4 for each area, and then there's an other. That other is National Board Certification, which can cover any of those areas. What in early childhood? Actually, I'm not sure about early childhood. I don't think that's the case. But when you are choosing programs for your literacy plan, you'll be choosing from this matrix. We've had some questions about that. That's how we're going to work. Now, does that mean you have to throw out something you're already doing? No, of course not. Things that are working well, that's what you can do. But this is where our Striving Readers funds will be pointed. That's going to be the direction that we go there. Okay. One thing else, and you don't have to go back, John, but one other thing that I want to say about our providers, very soon you're going to have a lot more information about each one. So that's going to include pricing, because you're going to contract with some folks. It's also going to include what they're offering. So you get to be really good consumers. You'll have the opportunity to talk with the providers and find out exactly if they're going to meet your need, because that's the whole idea, is what is our need. We're going to talk about needs assessment in just a second, and how can that be provided. Now, we also want to say up front the things that hopefully you're excited about, but we also don't want you to be surprised at some point to say, oh my goodness, I didn't realize the commitment. But one thing that's written into our grant is this, I would really call it an estimation of our professional learning commitment. But we have the thought that people that are joining initially, and what I mean by that is, let's say in your schools, and Shauna, did we put up that later on? Is there going to be that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got that up later on.
Okay, great, thank you. But in your schools, we know that there are early adopters. Like I was always that girl that I got excited about new things. I liked change, and I was on board. And so I would be one of those early adopters. We actually have sort of a range, a formula, you might say, for how many people we expect to be involved. Those are the people that jump on board and are the ones that are going to receive the most professional learning. They're the ones that in the end that we hope are going to be a part of the presentation with the providers. So it's not just going to be someone coming in, but actually building capacity in your teachers in lead roles. Those are those early folks they will receive more hours. Now, when we talk about hours, teachers and administrators usually start thinking, oh, we're going to have to stay after school for a month to make all this happen. But we're also talking about embedded learning. We're talking about collaboration. We're talking about all of the pieces that make up true learning, professional learning, that sort of thing. So please do not feel like it's going to be this burden that you can't do. It's just basically giving you credit for what you've been doing. And also how the district will support this investment. That's going to be something you'll want to explain in your grant, is show that the district is willing to maybe be creative with time and space and those kinds of things. Now, I do want to address this question that popped up from Paul. He said that thinking about the programs that were already there, those models, he said we currently are using some of these. Is there a supplant rule with this grant? And yes, there is. What we're hoping is if there are those cases that this money will sort of be freed up. You don't have to spend it on those things. You'll have more money for something else. So hopefully that'll be the case there for you, Paul. Okay, thank you. We have made available on the KYCL site, the Striving Reader site, literacy perks, and you may be familiar with that from some years ago. I think 2010 or 11 was the first year that we had perks, and that's a needs assessment plan. It takes you through, it's built around the literacy plan standards. If you've seen the Kentucky Literacy Plan, that plan is being revised. The state team came together. They're making revisions. I'm going to say that this plan, the new plan, is not going to be drastically different, but we are making sure that it accounts for that entire comprehensive piece, that we are looking at the birth to grade 12 all the way through. We also tried to think about transitions. That's going to be huge. I mean, you think about coming from age 5 into kindergarten, that's one of those critical transition points. Of course, middle school, high school, whatever your critical transition points are, we tried to talk about that. That'll be a part of your plan. But districts now can access literacy perks to think about their needs assessment. But I will say this, when we start building our plans, and hope you know, you don't have to build your plan by March the 2nd. That's sort of the beauty of it too. It's sort of been a catch-22, but I think it's a good thing. And we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. But you can begin to look at that, and there are suggestions. There are 2 pieces that you could look at. One is perks, and the other is the planning document that goes with it. They work hand in hand, and the literacy plan, of course, is a part of that as well. Okay. We do have outside monitoring folks, entities. So one is through Johns Hopkins. That's the Center for Research and Reform, CRRE, and also the Collaborative for Teaching and Learning. excuse me, which is here in Kentucky. And we've worked closely with them. They'll be building the monitoring and evaluation tools, but also those are the folks that will be asking, they're going to work with us to determine what kinds of time will be spent on this, what things we're looking for. And when we know all those details and when we get down to the awardees and all that, you'll know all of those things as well. That's going to be an interesting piece of this because, like I said, Kentucky's doing a few things a little bit differently than others. So we're curious to see how that comes out. Some of the monitoring will be looking at things like your data from KPREP, but also some other data that's going to be collected along those lines. But it also may be through surveys, teacher surveys, maybe after think about building that self-efficacy. Some of those surveys will be about their professional learning. So those kinds of things are to be expected for monitoring and evaluation. If you are applying for the grant, you need to know that everyone has to agree to be a part of this, that you are going to be monitored. Folks will be coming in, and not just these folks, but also KDE.
What that sounds?
Sorry, Jeff. But anyway, go ahead, Jonna. I love that sound, though.
No, no, that wasn't me.
No, I know. But go ahead.
Oh, gotcha, the slide. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, hang on a minute. There we go.
Okay, and this slide is, I looked this morning and it's still not up on my webpage, so I don't have control over that. So it takes a little bit of time, but this is an updated calendar of events that are happening. And I tried to pick the things that are really going to impact you from now until July. You already know about the RFA, that's why you're here. We have technical assistance going on. We're not at Roy Campbell Drive today, but hopefully this will be a very helpful technical assistance. And you always, like I said, there's always email, but also on the 8th, the 15th, and the 22nd, we have online meetings. Someone had asked yesterday that some of the, evidently on the RFA and on here, the times are different. I apologize for that. And we do have the time. So on the 8th, it's at 10 o'clock. On the 15th, well, I don't have that one right in front of me. Let's see, let me move this. There you go. 10, 15th is at 11, and the 22nd is at 2. That'll be a time when you can, it's just a question and answer period where you can send in questions while we'll be live, but still you can always send in questions at other times as well. I would think if we need more of those that we could also do that. The district intent to apply is due February 9th. That just is saying, you know, we've come to these sessions, we think we're interested, and that gives KDE an idea of how many reviewers we might need, how many copies we're going to, all of those things that come into play. If you send us an intent to apply and then you don't, that's okay. That happens as well. But we do appreciate it if you could, that's highly recommended that you do that. The deadline is March 2nd, and it is, I would call it one of those drop deadlines where it is, there's a time on that. It's 4 p.m. Eastern time. As we said yesterday, particularly, don't try to hit submit at 3:59 or even 3 o'clock. Because I need to think about all of the pieces in between. You're going to be sending large documents. You're going to be dealing with maybe a firewall. Well, not maybe. I'm pretty sure KDE has a good firewall. And whatever technical things that can happen. So I would definitely give myself plenty of time to do that. Even though that's your deadline, it has to be marked on the email before 4 p.m. or at 4 p.m. or earlier. Okay, so that's going to be really important for you to pay attention to. The peer review is going to be in mid-March, so that's going to be, and I know John will talk a lot more about peer review, but that's when folks will come together to look at your reviews that you've put in. They'll also make comments, those kinds of things. And then on or before April 9th, there will be the awards announcement. I have on there Commissioner's email, but we'll also be sending a letter. we have the literacy plans, and those are due June 15th, which is kind of a nice thing to look at that calendar and say, my proposal, I should know by April 9th, and then I have some time to work on this plan. That's what we want you to be very intentional about in the first place, is what's actually going to make this difference. Something I'd love to point out to everyone is, even if you weren't awarded the grant, or even if someone didn't even apply, that doesn't mean they can't build their own literacy plan based on our state plan and use our documents and our resources. One of the goals of our Striding Readers Grant is to have resources made available, because lots of things are going to surface during all of this, different learning, different resources, and we want to make that available to everyone. So that's something to be thinking about for the future as well. The funding, if everything goes perfectly, should be ready by July 1st, and that goes to your districts. And then we begin right away into professional learning. So we're calling them institutes. They'll probably end up being regional institutes where, as John had said yesterday, and I thought this is a really good point, if someone were to choose a certain model, and so many were in Hazard and then so many were in an area, then they're going to try to do a regional meeting to meet that. If that's not in the other place, they're going to do their best to work for them. In mid-July, we will have a summer convening for our literacy leadership teams. That's a mouthful. And every district will have one, and all the schools will have one as well. And then from September on to the end of our grant, there will be job-embedded learning. So when we're talking about those, what seem like really big numbers of hours for professional learning, that's a lot of what we're talking about, is that embedded learning. Okay, now, John, is there anything that you'd like to point out at this point we may have missed?
No, I will say that just again, to stress what Jackie said, this is a grant to put a proposal in so that you can later develop your district literacy plan. This is not a proposal to figure out what you're going to buy today. In fact, if you write a proposal and you put in there that I'm going to purchase ABC this and XYZ that and QRFT this, you probably won't score very well, because that's not the purpose of this proposal. The purpose of this proposal is to show your capacity for developing a literacy plan that's comprehensive and then implementing that. We'll be talking about that for the next couple of hours.
Okay.
Let's see if I can get it to move. All right. I take it that's my cue to keep going, huh?
I think so.
Well, welcome everybody.
Okay, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I'm going to keep this as casual as I keep all the regular training. So my coffee is at hand. I have my notes in front of me. I plan to just plow through as I normally would do. We had some discussion yesterday about how boring this will be. I will try to keep it as light as possible. And I will try to also embed some of the questions and even some corrections that we, or clarifications is probably a better word, that we made yesterday during the training in Frankfurt. So feel free to type in some questions to Jackie, and she will, from time to time, we'll come back to those. We also have a slide later where we will answer the questions from yesterday to kind of clarify some of those things. So as we go, we'll be answering some questions. Those will also show up in the frequently asked questions slides when those are updated in the future on the website. So I'll get started. Most of you, I think, probably have heard of me before or been to a training of mine. And my role for this is the same as it's always been. I am a grants person. I'm not KDE. Please expect Jackie to jump in at any time to say, here's what we want you to know. Here's what we planned and intended for this grant. The process is what we call a sub-award. KDE sent an application to the U.S. Department of Education. That application was approved, but the application itself was so that they could make 40 to 45 grants to school districts throughout the state to create these district literacy plans, and then later in the year to implement those plans. So my role is just to explain how I would write the grant if I were writing it. How would I create the best product possible to ensure that my district receives the funding? That's my role here today. And in doing that, we will explain a lot of the elements of the proposal and of the project itself. So welcome to my office, and we will plow through. So again, type your questions in as you go. Now, I can't really ask you who you are, but I will say that there were several of us that were represented there yesterday, several district leadership people, not as many literacy folks as I would have expected, literacy specialists, but several grant writers or folks who've written types of grants before, and there were lots of newbies. So if you are a newbie, don't worry, you're in good company. And I try to speak in English, I don't speak KDE, and I don't speak complicated language most of the time. So hopefully we'll speak at a level that everybody can understand today. So first things first, writing is 90% procrastination and 30% panic. I think that's quite a true statement. I think right now you're in both a little bit of procrastination and a little bit of panic. But I put this slide up here to also tell you that if I were writing this proposal, and I'm rather slow, I read slow, I write slow, I know that about myself. But it would take me 125 to 150 hours to develop this proposal and write it and submit it. Now, of that time, only about 20%, maybe even less, is actual writing time. Okay? So by that I mean you're going to have to get letters from your partners. You're going to be having conversations at every level of your district to get all the thinking integrated and get everybody on the same page. That takes time. You're not going to just sit down on a Friday morning and say, okay, let's just write this puppy right now. No, it's probably going to take more thinking time than that. I tell the story often about my 11-year-old grandson, and we were attending his little brother's basketball game, and he had gotten a writing assignment for the weekend, and his teacher told him, I want you to spend 45 minutes thinking and 45 minutes writing. And so he asked his mom, do I really have to sit there and think for 45 minutes? And I just kind of chuckled because I thought, yeah, you probably are going to do that. Anytime you're writing, there's this huge piece of thinking, collaborating, working with different people, asking questions, pushing back. That takes time. Also, most of the folks that I work with, we're not the queen of the world. We have to get permission to do the things we want to do. So, for example, this is a district proposal that will impact multiple schools across a district. There are very few of us that have the power to say, yes, school over there on the other side of my county, yes, you are going to do it this way. I don't have that power. So when I sit down to do a grant proposal, I have to do this thing called buy-in and get everybody on the same page. That takes time. So when we're talking about writing a grant proposal, the next couple of weeks really aren't about the writing as much as they are about the bringing people to the table. I don't want you to underestimate that. I also like to put that number to it, the 125 to 150, so that those of you who are tasked with doing this can go back and say, hey, that lady that was on the video, she said it was going to take this much time. Yeah, okay. I want to give you something to take back and say, okay, I need something freed up from my plate over the next couple of weeks because that's a lot of time that I don't have. So that's why that's there. Now, there's usually two pieces, really critical pieces to any grant project. Okay. One is the problem. Okay. In fact, John Grisham says when he's writing that the secret to great writing is that you build a character that everybody likes and you put him into a problem, and then the book is really just working him out of that problem. And I think if you've read his books, you'll see that. Now, occasionally he leaves them with a little bit of problem at the end, so no spoiler alerts there. Some of his books, they still have problems at the end. But that's kind of what a grant is. You state your problem, and then the proposal is your best plan for getting you out of the grant. That's the normal way of writing a grant. Let's see if I can keep it up on the screen for a minute. But that's not this grant. This grant is not that. Okay? This grant is a little different. In fact, this grant is not about solving the problem yet. Okay? So if you have your RFA in front of you, your request for applications, if you'll go to page 11, and by the way, we'll go back and forth in this document, so it's good for you to have it out and in front of you. Okay? So look at this document, and on my document, my pages, Jackie was picking at this yesterday, but it says not normal across the top, okay? This is not a normal set of criteria. So, and it's okay. It's just different. You know, my husband would tell you I'm not normal, so it's just different. So on page 11, you'll notice these 10 sections or 9 sections that are listed, 10 sections here. And let's start with part 1. I want you to see that part 1 is about your need. This is the problem side. This is the normal section. On this section, in the need section, you're going to actually look at the describing the literacy needs of your district and your schools. You're going to describe the students. You're going to look at the process and criteria you use to select your partners to help with that. But that's where the normalcy kind of ends. Section 2 then doesn't say, well, what are you going to do about that problem, which is the normal way of grants. Instead, what it says very clearly is, tell us about the current and historic literacy services that you've provided. Okay? What have you been doing? Not what are you going to do, what have you been doing? And there are 3 criteria there that you would describe your current and historic literacy services. Next up, in that third part, you're going to see your district support and commitment. Okay, are you willing to do this grant? Are you coming to the project with a willingness to do that? Will you spend the money in the 16%, 42%, and 42% as prescribed? Okay, so again, you're not saying what am I going to buy? You're not saying what am I going to do? You're just saying these are the things that I'm committed to. Yes, I'm committed to this project. Part 4 are your partner commitments. Have you provided the specific things that your partners have you brought letters from them saying who they are? Again, not I'm going to buy ABC product and implement it with fidelity. No, it's that I'm going to have the appropriate partners, including preschool centers, preschool providers, early learning providers, early learning agencies. We'll talk more about what that means in a minute, but that you have them on board and ready to go. Part 5, again, that phrase current and historic, and it wants you to describe your current and historic RTI process, not the RTI process that you'll have once you have this project in place, but what you're doing right now, that you know and are able to see what a good RTI process is. Part 6, which is worth the most points in this proposal, is about your professional learning. And again, bullet by bullet, describe current professional learning needs. Okay, describe the current professional learning provided. Describe the current process for evaluating that. Describe the allocation of time and how it's made. Describe the historic roles of classroom teachers. It's not saying what will the amount of professional learning that you'll provide during this process be. No, it's saying, what do you do right now? Where are you right now? And the same for part 7. Part 7 gets to that capacity for you to continue this success, to implement good stuff with your folks. Okay? So it's going to talk to you about specific things related to working with multiple schools. How have you done that in the past? Okay? How have you used professional learning communities? Next up is the monitoring and assessment. It just wants you to describe what you currently do. What do you currently measure? How are you currently working with that? Part 9 is the budget. And okay, so here you got me. This one's tough, okay? But let's look at the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bullets here. Bullets 1 through 4 are all about what your district normally does to make sure money is spent correctly on the stuff it's supposed to be spent on. We'll go through those bullets later, but, you know, do you use a bid list? How do you determine pricing? All of those things belong here. The 5th bullet on page 13 under part 9, the 5th bullet says, include a detailed budget narrative explaining the specific use of funds. That's a little tougher, but we'll have some strategies later. It'll be one of the things we discussed in the last hour of our program today that will talk about how you develop a budget right now for a district literacy plan you haven't developed yet and won't develop until April and May. Okay? There's some very specific things on that. That is probably the most challenging piece to me of the RFA, but it's totally doable. It's totally doable. So I'll tell you how I would do it as we move forward. Okay? So what is this in terms of a traditional grant project? Yes, you're still going to tell the problem, but you're also going to talk about your capacity, your current and historic literacy, and the capacity to continue, your current professional learning to demonstrate that you have the capacity to continue that, your partnerships that say, wow, we've thought this through, this is really great, and also your use of those monitoring, your assessments and monitoring. We're going to be good at this because we've been doing good work, and we're going to expand on that with this project. But first, the money. Some of you may be new to grants. You may not understand quite how grants work. Yes, there are strings. This is not your money. In fact, it's not even KDE's money. It is the U.S. Department of Education's money, and they get to tell us a little bit what we're supposed to do with it. So KDE has to take their lead from them, and we take our lead from KDE. It's our jobs here as we're writing this grant proposal to put a good proposal out regardless of how much money there is. Now, there happens to be a lot of money for this. I think there's ample money to do some really good things. But so just be careful that you understand, you know, it's not going to pay for everything you want it to pay for. It's not going to hire a bunch of staff for you to do this work, but it is going to provide some good resources. And your job is to develop a grant proposal that shows that you're able to do the work once you have a district literacy plan in place. Okay. If you can't abide by rule number 1 and 2, you don't have to apply. And I'm just plain spoken. There's nothing worse in the world than applying for a grant, getting the grant, and everybody being angry about the grant the entire time. Okay, this is your time to think about that and say, you know, I'm not sure this one's for us, and take a step back. All right, so your request for applications, your wonderful document that you hopefully have downloaded online, you will see that there are a couple of amendments in there. There is one noted in red, in particular on page 2. So it's been updated a little bit, but this is your instruction book, and there are lots and lots of instructions. You know, you're going to write 25 pages, and it took and you're going to have some attachments, but it took the KDE 22 pages to tell you how to do that. So that I always find that, or 23. Find that I chuckle at that every time, but that's the norm. So there are people you can contact. They're on page 1. You can send in your emails to KDE for the next couple of weeks. You can also participate on those online conversations that we'll be having, and of course you can text in on the chat today as you have questions. But I can't stress how important this RFA is. I have recently put together a couple of trampolines. I'll save you the long version of the story. But if you don't have the instruction book for putting together a trampoline, you might get it put together, but it's not going to be very pretty. If you follow the instructions, just like the instructions say, it'll take you an hour. Without them, you may not get finished. So make sure that you use this RFA as it's intended, as a guide for your writing. And I'll show you a couple of tricks for using that as we go through. Okay, all right. There are some absolutes. On page 1, you'll see a number of absolutes. The deadline, for example, there is no exception. If you hit send and you submit electronically your email to KDE at 3:59, but it takes 2 minutes for the email to travel from your desk to KDE's, and it gets there at 4:01, you will not be read. That proposal will be rejected by the department. And yes, that has happened more than once. So please know that it is due at 4 p.m. Eastern time. Get that in before that time. Questions there are noted to be sent in before February 23rd. So you still have about 3 weeks to get any of your questions in. And I encourage you to do so. Even if we answer the question in our conversation today, go ahead and send that in because that way we'll be sure to get you an answer in writing as well as in our conversation today. Where to submit the proposal is also listed there. It goes to that same KDE RFP, and we'll look at how to submit it a little later on in terms of the nomenclature, the naming of that file, because you want to make sure they find your file. And then there are also some special instructions there at the bottom of page 1 of your RFA. We're going to go through those a little bit with some detail. First, it talks about that it's limited to districts on behalf of the K12 feeder pattern. And that feeder pattern we'll talk about. But we've got a lot of questions about co-ops. Can co-ops apply? And I think the co-ops now have been brought all into the loop. So the answer is no, a co-op can't apply, but a co-op certainly can be of service to the district and can provide some of these literacy supports as they go along. In fact, a couple of the co-ops were represented at the training yesterday, and of course, it will be at GREC on Monday. So, of course, they'll be on hand. But this is a district initiative, and so it should be operated through the district there. Second up, the eligibility is based on high needs students. That comes out of the feds. What is high needs? And we've defined high needs as a high school with 65% or greater free and reduced lunch. That is based on the qualifying data. There are lots of ways to do this, but the cleanest and we think the most inclusive is that qualifying data. Yes, Jackie?
Yeah, so I had lots of questions about qualifying data yesterday, and really since we released the RFA. What Jonna said is absolutely true. That's the simplest way. You don't need to make any sort of calculations to try to figure out what your rate is. Just go to that. It's linked in the RFA, or you can also go to KDE qualifying data and you'll find it there, but it's the 2017-18. There was also a question way early on. We had to actually amend the RFA because when we first put this out, we used the 16-17 data to look at it to see where folks might be. And about the time we put the RFA out, the new qualifying data was put out. So we just updated it. But that's all you need to use. So please don't try to make calculations. We've had a lot of confusion about that.
Yep. So again, and if you're a CEP, if you're 100% because you've chosen that and you've met those qualifications, then yes, you meet the 65% free and reduced lunch rate. That's something that KDE has explicitly stated. And that's a high rate. We realize that 65% is a high rate. I will tell you, we started at 70%. Yikes, that was even higher. So the 65%, to make sure again that we in putting this across the state are meeting that most disadvantaged student calculation. Okay? So that's why that's there. Also on that first page of your RFA, it will talk about some of the monetary allocations that you must meet that. And that's also referenced on page 8 in the chart where it talks about small, medium, and large. That was based on the numbers of schools and students. It's a category that we've kind of played with a bit over the time to make sure that you get the appropriate amount of resources and that we can still have a lot of grantees. So if you'll look over at pages 22 and 23, you'll see that the districts have been cross-referenced there. This does not mean that you're eligible based on free and reduced lunch. That you're still going to have to figure out. But if you were eligible by free and reduced lunch, this is the category, small, medium, or large, that you would fit in, and that references you back to the funding chart on page 8. So, any specific questions on that about your specific district, again, is a good question to send in either through the chat or to the FAQ email address. Also, each district. Go ahead.
I'm just going to say one question. Paul asked, can costs from award announcement to July 1st be part of the budget? So I've been thinking about that. So the quick answer is that your district won't be able to draw down money until you actually have that contract or MOU in place. But if there is something that KDE is saying everybody's going to meet, and this is before that July 1, and we're all coming together, then we'll cover that cost, travel, whatever, that, hotel, that kind of thing. So Paul, if you have something more specific, feel free to go ahead and ask that question.
Right. And exactly right. Any of the travel, any of the expense that you occur in getting to those sessions that we have in April, that cost will be covered by KDE at this point. I believe that's budgeted in KDE's 5%. So it's not even going to hit your grant. Okay, that's going to be out of KDE's. Now, in terms of purchasing programs or hiring staff, that would be another subject, and that is, I believe, I can say that's going to be July 1 for those types of expenditures.
It's Paul Baker. I'm sorry. So I was thinking, like, if we're going to do some kind of planning, getting people together, if we got the award, to kind of, that part of it might occur after school or, on I don't know, something along that. So maybe getting staff to do that. Those were kind of the expenses. But yeah, certainly like travel and stuff, anything like that, I would. But I wasn't thinking like programs. I don't think we'll be there yet. But, but that was what I was thinking.
Okay.
I can't hear Jackie either. I don't know.
Yeah, I can't hear Jackie either. Jackie, we just lost you. There you go.
I'm not sure, Paul. I'll think about that a little bit more and even ask that question, but I don't think you'd be able to do much with the grant until you've got that contract in place for those kinds of things.
Yep.
Okay.
One of the beauties of this proposal and Jackie referenced this in her part is that and it was a chicken and an egg thing the entire time that the proposal was developed by KDE in last year, as they were developed last summer, was, okay, we don't want to require them to have a plan because that's too much work. We want to be at the table with each of the districts while they do the plan. Well, okay, that means that they've got to come together before the plan and develop the plan, and then they have the MOA. Okay, so the grant itself is kind of contingent on that approved district literacy plan. So you're going to receive notification of award, but between mid-April and July, that's when you're developing the plan. And in a real technical sense, you're not approved for the award until the district's approved plan is in hand, and that won't be until June, mid-June. Now, let me quickly say, the developing of the plan is not a gotcha. Okay, it's not going to be something that where you go, wait a minute, we thought we had this money and we've planned our whole next year on that. Yeah, you're good to go. You're going to get an approved plan in mid-June. So, go out and read Kentucky's literacy plan And as an old boss of mine used to say, if that gives you heartburn, then you've got a problem. Okay. But that shouldn't give you heartburn. That you should be fine. That's good literacy stuff out there. So your plan should align to that.
Yeah, and so in our plan, what we want to do as part of our support is to help you have the best plan possible. So,
Right.
like you said, it's definitely not a gotcha. It's we're really excited about everyone having a quality plan that's going to affect kids. So that's what we're all about, and that's what we're going to make happen. So sometimes it might take a little longer for others, but that's okay.
Yep. All right, so let's talk about that K12 feeder pattern. And it could look different for each and every one of you as you move forward. But the feeder pattern, basically, schools that align for the most part. Some of you will be different. Some of you will be a little unusual, and we've even clarified some stuff yesterday. It's not going to be exact or perfect or as clean as we all hoped it would be, but you as a district will decide what that feeder pattern is. And importantly, all the feeder patterns will start with a high school that meets the eligibility. Okay, so high school with 65% or more free and reduced lunch. Then it's going to have a middle school, at least a middle school that aligns to that, and you have determined that the majority of the students in there are feeding into, they're matriculating into that school, that high school. Then the same thing for your elementary school. Or wait, maybe you have more than one elementary school. Or wait, maybe you have more than one middle school that's going into that high school. So this is the feeder pattern you've identified to make sure that, again, comprehensive. Oh, but wait, you also are going to have some preschools, some type of birth to 5 learning centers that are feeding into your school. Okay? Why? Because, frankly, everybody in the literacy line blames somebody. Okay, the high school blames the middle school, blames the elementary school, blames the preschools, blames the parents of the newborns, blames the high school that didn't teach the moms to read. Okay, so I could create a cycle all the way around. And so to create a comprehensive literacy plan, everybody has to be on the table. If a set of students misses that, then that's a little difficult. Yesterday we had some questions about what if one of my schools won't do it, can't do it, it's not appropriate to do it. What if one of my elementary schools has this awesome thing going on and we don't want to impact that? Well, it's possible that KDE is going to say, okay, but you're going to have to respond to that in your proposal. There's a specific criteria that says, why didn't you choose some of the schools in your district? Why didn't you use those? And you're going to have to defend your position on that, whatever that position is. So just, I've used the expression, you can light your pants on fire, but it might not be the best option for you. Okay, so think about that carefully. We all know and recognize the challenge that bringing everybody together, having that consensus is, but this is about each of the transition points from early learning to kindergarten, through elementary, over to middle school, over to high school, and hopefully beyond. So it is birth to 12. It is comprehensive. So really work to see. We would anticipate most of the grantees will, if not nearly all, I don't want to say all, but nearly all, will have all of their schools in that feeder participating. So again, I want to throw this up here. We got a lot of pushback yesterday on this, on the previous slide, which we kind of thought we would. But I'll just say, you know, if you think your school is, or your situation is weird, unique, special, extraordinary even, then that may be a conversation for you to have, or a question to send into KDE. Again, that can be done during these sessions. It also, I'm sure that Jackie would be happy to have a conversation with you, particularly if you're one of the folks on the call right now, because we should have been in hazard today, and because of the snow, we're not. So if you're on the call right now, it might be a good idea to send a question to Jackie and just say, hey, Jackie, I'd love to talk with you. Can we set that up? And we'll leave that door open to you.
Yeah, definitely. And we know, I mean, we've looked at our school districts, and we know that they're all made so differently. I look at some that we would consider small, but they have a lot of schools, and that's something we do. They're just really small schools that are spread out and so forth. And some are K-8 and all those kinds of things. So we like talking about. I hate to say we like it because it's really complicated, but it helps us to think through how we might address some of these issues.
All right. So we understand there's some specifics we can help you with. Let us do that. Okay. All right. So another word about pre-K, because I really want you to understand that pre-K wasn't thrown in there as just this extra little thing. Oh wow, we have to do. No, this is the crux of the project. Okay. There are reasons why there's some absolutes about pre-K and about birth to 5 specifically. They're built into here. You are required, and as we go through the RFA, we'll look at the language that's specific to it, to align your work from birth to the elementary level and on up. And that's why there are some monetary levels that are put in there, as well as I'm sitting here trying to get my mouse to go. There we go. As well as some criteria that deal with that. There's a reason why you're required to have minimum numbers of partners or agencies working with you. That's to ensure that work occurs. Okay, so more on that as we go through. All right, so the page 2 of your RFA. Wow, we finally made it to page 2. Okay, so page 2 of your RFA, as I turn over there myself, grab a swig of coffee if you're so inclined. As you've noticed, I will. My adult beverage of choice. It's here. Okay, so we're ready. So page 2 lists those online Q&A sessions. Those have been updated in some places, not updated. So make sure that you're aware. Again, the online Q&As are on the 8th, February 8th at 10 a.m., February 15th at 11 a.m. Eastern time. All those times are Eastern. And then on the 22nd at 2 p.m. So those links will be posted on the KDE website. You'll be able to just go there when you're ready for the call and Zoom in or Skype in, as the case may be. The intent to apply is February 9th, and there is a form on the website. I've got it by email, but there is a form up there on the website that you can use to tell KDE that you are going to apply. If you miss that, it's okay. Just have good manners. Email them after that and say, okay, we thought we weren't, but now we are going to apply. And that is a planning tool to help KDE. It is not a requirement. It's just a polite thing to help KDE to get that, know how many reviewers that they need to have. Okay. All right. July 1 is when that funding is available. That's our hope, and KDE will be working, the finance department will be working to get those MOAs ready for you for the early July. Once you have an once the MOA is in the works, I believe, for example, this is, KDE has been good about this, finance has been good about this. Let's say that July 1 comes and you don't have your MOA in your hand. Often they will let you do some spending with reimbursement in those early weeks. As they say, at your own risk, but that would be a time when, yes, you could begin to obligate, most likely. And Jonna said that, not KDE, but we can work on that. But July 1 is pretty firm in terms of expenses. All right, on page 2 at the bottom, background and purpose is noted there. And I want to just really stress that. If you get lost in all of the stuff of this, if, for example, when vendors are calling you and you get really crazy and you're thinking and you go, how am I going to do this? I don't have the staff for this. How am I going to come back to this purpose? Just this is what this is about. And this goes for any grant project, because people start getting in your face saying, we should do this and we should do this and we should do this. Well, this on page 2, this is what you should do. Okay. This is the background and purpose of the program, to develop literacy teams that can go into your district and work with children and teachers at every level to make sure comprehensive literacy instruction is available, okay? That kids from birth to 12th grade have good things going on in terms of literacy. I mean, that's the absolute here. Okay? The top of page 3, there are 5 bullets there. Okay? And each of these bullets is important. Okay? So as Jackie described earlier, Kentucky's literacy is going to include reading, writing, speaking, and listening. Not just reading and writing, but speaking and listening as well. Kentucky has adopted that model. So your district literacy plan will address that as well. Now, let me be clear on this. At the bottom of page 2, it says your plan will include, not your grant proposal, okay? Your plan, when you develop it in April and May and begin to implement it in July, your district literacy plan will include these things. And so it will include learning opportunities. When has KDE ever offered a grant that didn't include learning opportunities? Okay, so yes, in July, you will start some learning opportunities. You'll be integrating some of your technology and also using universal design, but that's in July when you're implementing your plan. You'll also be looking at data. Again, this is stuff we're supposed to do anyway. That district literacy plan should help you to look at data and pull the important information out of that, that have the analysis and looking forward, the gap closing. And then assessment of the project, an assessment system of some type that helps make sure you're aligned with the state standards. So all of these are things that your district literacy plan will include when you develop it in April, May, and June. Okay. On page 3 at the bottom, we're going to cover some beginning on page 3 and going on through page 3 through page 5. We're going to look at some of those definitions, and this is just an overview. I'm not going to read these to you. How mind-numbing would that be? So we'll just look at a few of these. Disadvantaged child is mentioned. And disadvantaged child is a really broad definition. It's I don't want to say it's anything you think it could be, but that last line does say other indicators, okay? So if you have, for example, in some of our communities that have high levels of non-English speakers, but ELL has always been a disadvantage there, but there may be something really unique about yours. I don't know. These are mostly our children of poverty. We know that you're going to have 65% at your high school, but you also may have a high homeless population. You may have a high number of children in foster care or who live with their grandparents. And so all of those things could be some of your indicators, and you'll be describing those in your grant proposal, okay, your current disadvantaged students. We'll also look at the endorsed programs, which are noted on page 4. This comes straight out of the state's approved proposal. So you'll even see references there to some of the pages from that grant. But these are, if you'll look at for a second, on the left-hand column, you'll see that it lists the characteristics of comprehensive literacy. And now the federal program and now this state program are required, I want to say by statute, to implement the strong characteristics of comprehensive literacy. So all of our programs here have been crosswalked back to these to make sure that's what the matrix is about. Now, some of you may be saying, well, but those are swell. I've got nothing against those programs, but that's not what I want to do. Our teachers are pushing back, saying, I don't know about that. Well, I want to recall you back a decade or so to a program we had called Reading First. Now, do you remember how crazy that was? In fact, at that point, the feds and KDE both came in and said, we want you to use research-based programs. And then we said, go out and find them. And this was back kind of at the beginning of this whole need for research-based. And many of us were flummoxed, for lack of a better word. Well, what the heck does that mean? What are we supposed to do? And so to try to help with that, KDE set up some vendor fairs. And then the vendors all came out. And then we were just bombarded, even more so than we are now, by people who claim to be, some rightly, some not, research-based. So in the proposal to the feds, the KDE came and said, we know that these are good. These have the research base. These are the ones that we're going to choose, and we will help folks with that. What this does is many, many things. First, it ensures that the disadvantaged students that you're identifying receive research-based programs. Okay? It also ensures that both Kentucky and you can use resources wisely. So, for example, and Jackie mentioned this earlier, if we've got 15 of the 45 grantees who are using the adolescent literacy model for their high schools and middle schools, well, we can now look at where those schools are and work with the vendor to help you have regional trainings rather than you having to go all the way across the country to get that training done, okay, or all the way across the state. So that helps us with some resources there.
And if I could
and
throw
again,
in, if I could throw in real quickly,
please do.
Be careful too, because lots of vendors are sending things. I'm sure you've seen that already. There's actually a technical assistance that's going on that I don't really know anything about. So I'm just saying there's lots of reasons to be careful. So pay attention. We've given you a matrix of things. That's really all we're choosing from. So that would be the place to go for real guidance or ask us.
Yeah. And I'll because again, I'm not KDE, so I can say this a little more strongly. If the answer to your question doesn't come from KDE, it may be the wrong answer. I'm just saying, okay? Because it's really difficult. The vendors have really kind of not been at the table. This is not something that KDE is pushing specific vendors. They've chosen the research bases, and these vendors happen to have established that. Could there have been others? Possibly, but those would not have been comprehensive literacy approaches, okay? Remember that your district plan is about comprehensive literacy approaches. We'll talk about interventions in just a bit. We've got some clarification we'll do on that. But this project is about comprehensive literacy. I want to be very clear on that. We're not about ABC intervention for 2-year-olds, okay? We're about comprehensive literacy instruction. So this is the list. And again, I said this 30 minutes ago or so. We're not saying you have to A, apply for the grant, or B, use all of these recommended things. If you apply for the grant, you're agreeing to use something from this slate. And that's up to you, whether you apply.
Yeah,
so I hope I've put that delicately enough.
And also choosing something from each of those categories. So something for that birth to 5 and elementary, middle, and high.
Yep, exactly. Not every grant program is for every district or every school. We've got that. But again, you need to choose if you're willing to choose from this slate. And again, that's just based on your general knowledge of where your literacy, your comprehensive literacy is. Okay. All right, let's see here. There we go. Again, you must choose at least one strategy from each of the areas: early childhood, elementary, middle, and high. All right. Now, also on page 4, you have a definition of the GEPA statement, the GEPA statement. It's sometimes called Section 427. This is strictly a federal thing that you have to do. A GEPA statement is a simple statement that you are going to mitigate for any barriers for students with some disability or some disadvantage. So, for example, let's say that you have students who speak other languages. A GEPA statement might say, we will ensure that literacy services are provided excuse me, in a student's native language to ensure that they are able to participate. Yeah. Another thing might be transportation. Let's say that you have a child who is part of your comprehensive literacy. Child needs to have access to a specific library. For example, you might include that you will have transportation as something to knock down a barrier. Okay. So, very simple statement. Your federal programs office should be able to help you with that. Whoever's doing that in your district should be able to help you with that. Or even Google GEPA. If you Google GEPA statement, I bet you'll find some and be able to help yourself there.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I did that myself. I've never written a GEPA statement myself. It makes sense because being a teacher and a principal, those are always things that you come upon. And we want to do this thing, whatever it is, but we can't do it after school because kids don't have transportation. So how are we going to address that transportation issue? Also, I like the thought that when I read the statements, that they personalize them to their situations. So really think about, you don't want just a generic statement, but one that really focuses on issues that you have.
Exactly. All right, so let's keep moving forward. Intervention. Okay, so one of the things that's defined there is literacy intervention on the bottom of page 4. And intervention is one small piece, as I pull my earplugs out, one small piece of the overall comprehensive literacy strategy. Okay, it's not comprehensive literacy, nor is it 14 interventions in 2 grade levels. So yes, there will be some opportunity for literacy intervention to be built into your literacy plan. Does that mean that you can pay for an intervention out of these funds? And I'm going to give a very broad, I'm not sure. We're getting clarification on that. You are required to have appropriate interventions. There is a statement in the RFA about some things that are required. So there's some clarification that KDE is getting as to whether or how much of your funds may be used for intervention. For this specific work we're doing today, right now, and here we're focusing on your proposal for a district literacy plan, and you will not find the word intervention in the evaluation criteria. Okay, so you're not going to write about an intervention in your, except what you already have in place. You're not going to write about ABC intervention that you want to purchase in your proposal. Okay? So again, clarification will be provided on that through the FAQs, we hope, but also in April when you're sitting down with KDE to develop your plan, that will be a topic of conversation as well. And your partners, the definition of partners is listed on page 5. Okay. So partners are any types of agencies. We use that word very broadly. And in fact, there's a couple of places where we kind of correct some words. We'll come upon those, as we go through, we'll come to those. But you'll notice here on page 5, almost in the middle, this may, for example, include independent home-based and faith-based child care and preschool providers, Head Start centers, public preschool providers, and other nonprofits that provide literacy supports for children in the continuum, including libraries, after school, and mentoring programs. So when we say a partner, we're talking about the broad spectrum, okay, even a first step, anybody who's helping support you with preschool. When we talk about a preschool center, we are talking specifically about a preschool center, like a Head Start, like your public preschool, but also First Baptist Church preschool, or even an Aunt Sue's preschool. Okay, so those are those centers that are providing instruction or at least care. Anyone I could say in the state now that's required to have required to participate in the Kentucky STARS program. Okay, if they're required to be evaluated, if they are a legal caregiving center and preschool type center, then that's what we're talking about for those centers.
And if I could I meant to say this earlier when we were talking about the matrix. Kids Now is listed on the matrix. It's also one of those things that was when we wrote the grants, it was Kids Now, and now it's transitioned over to Kentucky All-Stars. So that's, just think of that as one of the same. So we will change that in the matrix, but just know that's what we're talking about is Kentucky All-Stars.
All right. Now, page 5, funding is listed. And we're going to talk a little bit about the funding for the program. Again, 40 to 45 grants are anticipated to be awarded. Yeah, could it be 48? Maybe. Yeah, if the applications, we get a whole lot more small applications than we anticipate, then yes, there might be more. The way the funding is going to work is that the proposals are going to be scored by a team of reviewers we'll talk about. After that scoring, those scores will be ranked. Okay, so the team of reviewers will put the scores out, the scores will be ranked, and from that point on, the money will go as far as it goes. Okay, so we'll fund this one and this one and this one and this one, number 44, number 45, and then we'll see, you know, where the money is. So, and then award all of those for which there is money available. Okay? That's the anticipation. The average there for 2 years, across the 2 years, is $500,000. Again, page 8 has that little matrix. You'll notice that the first year has more money than the second year. That is because KDE foresees that you'll need more money in the first year than in the second year. Also, we didn't mention this yesterday, but let me mention to you, because this is federal money, this is not, it's federal money from the U.S. Department of Education to the Kentucky Department of Education. This funding is not on the current chopping block. So this funding is unless somebody somewhere messes something up at KDE, like, you know, is jail worthy, this money's going to be there. So it's not for negotiation in the current legislative session. All right, so the eligibility, again, is noted there. It includes poverty, deficits in literacy, being able to engage those early learning centers. I'm going to talk about that for a second. Provide services at every level, and then use an approved program. So that's what you're agreeing to when you go out to get the money. Okay, so again, if you can't agree to use one of those programs, don't apply. Save yourself the trouble. Let's look specifically, though, at item number 3 on your RFA there at the bottom of page 5. Everyone who submits a proposal agrees that they will participate with their early learning education provider. Okay, now when we say that, an early education provider, we're talking about a preschool or some type of center that brings in the little bitties and works with them on their pre-literacy. Okay? Now, and you're required to have a minimum of 3 early learning centers or agencies for the small feeder systems, 5 for the medium, and 7 for the larger system. Now, why are there minimums? Well, you know, if we had said you must have centers, some of you, I'm sure not you that's looking at me right now, but someone would have said, oh, well, that means just 2. I can have 2. No, it needs to be, we would love it if it was every possible early learning center in your region, but that's not logical. So we try to choose numbers that would reflect your commitment to working with the 0 to 5. Okay, now you're going to get 16% of your funding to do that work. 16%. So I don't know what 16% of $500,000 is for that average, but that's a pretty good chunk of change there. Why are those required? To make sure that those little bitties are brought in and brought up through the comprehensive literacy. Now I'll take a step back here and I'm going to get my teacher finger out. You always say, and not you, but you always say that, if the parents would bring them to us ready to read, well, here's your chance. That's what this is for. 16% of your funding should be spent to help get those kids to you ready. I don't know what that means in your district, but that's part of your district plan, is to figure that out and address it. So again, 3 for small schools as defined on the list on pages 22 and 23, and 5 for medium-sized districts and 7 for the larger. Okay? There may be, we had some yesterday where it was really a challenge to think about the 3. Some of our districts are really small or really rural. Well, that's a one-on-one conversation with Jackie, I think.
Yeah, and I've been trying to get some more clarification on that too, just to think, for me to think about, because I'm used to particular things from districts where I work. So I'm trying to broaden my horizons on that. It was interesting to have those conversations yesterday.
All right, so page 6, we're moving along. Page 6, we're looking at schools and partners here that are still talking a little bit about that. You're going to identify your schools, and I want to make a clarification here on page 6. So at page 6, there's a thing that says district identification of schools. Okay, this really there's a word change we want to make in there. Okay, so I'm going to get through my slide and see what it says. You're going to have a letter of interest from each partner that are going to have these 5 things. In this particular case, if you'll look at the second sentence in that paragraph, district identification of schools, it should say, where it says this should include each school, comma, preschool center or agency, it should not have the word school there. Okay, so you can cross out the word school. It should read, this should include each early learning preschool center. Jackie?
Yes, this is an amendment we're making on the RFA. It's just not posted again. And I would like to say, and I hope you read this on the RFA, but it's really your duty to check back to see if there is, a change, if there's something there. The folks in the grant department will put it in red that there's an amendment, but definitely check that out. I mean, we're not trying to be tricky. We're trying to make it as a good an RFA as possible. And also and I'm sure that John is going to bring this in, but that happens again at the bottom where it says to be clear, we would take out school there again in that parentheses.
Yes, I had missed that one, so let me get that one as well. Okay. So these 5 bullets, that's what's important about this. These 5 bullets really apply to your early learning and your partners there for that. So what does one of those letters look like, and why is it important? Well, you're being asked to have a letter of interest from these birth to 5 agencies, and not because they love you or that you love them, but to make sure they understand the commitment they're making and working with you on early literacy. So what is that commitment? These 5 bullets, and it's 1 through 5. Okay, so here's what it looks like. If I were writing a letter to work with, and sorry if I just blasted the microphone there. If I were writing this letter, this is what it would look like. Okay, it would say, here are the things that I'm going to do. It's going to be, number 1, here's our current relationship. Number 2, here's how our staff from our agency, what we're going to do about that. Number 3, here's how parents are going to be involved. Number 4, here are the type of supports we're going to provide. And number 5, here's our commitment to the project specifically and what kind of work we're going to do. So when I say we don't want a love letter, I'm being quite literal. We do not want that letter that says, oh, we just love them. We've been working with them for as long as we can remember. And if that Miss Smith is involved, we would go to the ends of the earth for her. You've all seen that letter, right? So just be a little careful. I would even see, and I'm a control freak. When I do this kind of stuff, I kind of write the letters myself. But I can see you sitting down with your partners and maybe pulling out the laptop and y'all drafting this letter to make sure everybody understands what the commitment will be. And part of that commitment is your early learning folks participating as a full partner on the district literacy team. Okay, so you will have members from each of those levels, from early literacy to elementary to middle to high. You'll have all of those folks on your district literacy team who are coming together in April to help you design your district literacy plan. Okay. All right. Also at the bottom of page 6 is that intent to apply again. Just go to the website, file that, and you'll be good to go with that. Send that on in. Yeah. All right, page 7, requirements for funded districts. Now, this we had a little pushback here yesterday. It says at the top of page 7, if funded, the districts and where applicable partners must agree to. Okay, so these are things that you must agree to. These are the 8 things. And one of the things, for example, that is required, you've got under that required activities, these are your pinky swears, your blood oath that you're going to provide these specific things as part of your plan. So absolutely, you must have that. Jackie is clarifying some of the things related to the appropriate number of partners at the in terms of the early literacy partners. So again, check those FAQs that'll be posted in coming days and updated, I might add, from time to time to make sure you've got the most recent definitions of those or answers for those. On the required activities, okay, you're required here, and there are several, there's 6 points here, as well as some additional activities. So the required activities, once you are funded on July 1, is that you're going to implement your approved plan. Okay, so let's go back and talk about that. This is February. So right now you're writing a proposal to be included in the planning process. Okay, you're not writing a proposal yet to implement your plan. Writing a proposal to develop the plan. In April, that work will begin. In April and May, and in June, you're going to submit your district literacy plan to KDE. There'll be lots of support in there. There'll be face-to-face meetings as well as some online supports for that. I would anticipate that, you know, if I were a district, I would even send a draft of my plan to KDE ahead of time saying, hey, can you help inform this? Can you help us tweak it? And then in June, KDE, the state literacy folks will all come together in some type of big retreat process, and they will read those 40 to 45 district literacy plans, provide some feedback, and get that back to you somewhere around June 15th, June 16th. You would then make those changes or push back again. This is not, again, a gotcha. This is we want you to have a great plan. And then by July 1, you would start to implement, that's this bullet, your approved plan. And so between now and July 15th, we'll get you to that plan. You're also required to have professional learning at every level. We'll show you in a bit more about what we think that looks like. But that not only includes at every level, it means for all of your staff. You know, I want you to hear that. We're not talking about picking a couple of really smart people at your high school who are going to participate in literacy. No. If, for example, you were to choose the adolescent literacy model, which is targeting middle and high school, there would be work for all of your teachers that to help ensure literacy is appropriate and improving, because we know all teachers teach literacy whether they want to or not. They either do it well or they don't, but they're teaching something. So we're going to make sure that all of your staff, all of your teachers have training. That will be across a 3-summer and 3-school-year period. Okay, so follow the bouncing ball here. In July 1, there will be some meetings held through the summer, probably July and August, both with KDE around your plans and with your selected comprehensive literacy folks. Okay? You'll go to a couple of days of PD related to your selected program, your selected comprehensive approaches for each of those levels, and the appropriate teachers will go to the appropriate places. Okay, the preschool folks don't have to go to adolescent literacy. I'm pretty sure I can say that. Yeah. But you'll take all those teachers, you'll take probably a third of them in the first summer, 25, 30%, maybe a few less. Then during the school year, those same teachers will participate in 1 or 2 days of standalone training through the whole year, and the rest will be embedded. Then in next summer, teachers will go back, and there'll be a new set of teachers that will go back to the standalone type of 2 or 3 days of intensive instruction or professional learning. then they will go to the schools and they will be supported by that initial group of teachers as they begin to embed. They'll also have a couple of days of standalone PD. By the next summer, that'll be our third summer, but the funding ends on September 30th. So that set of teachers won't have the opportunity to go through any additional training days, standalone days after that summer, but they will have 2 cohorts of trained teachers to support them. And those teacher leaders will be providing those additional supports. They'll receive some training, and most of the models will have a gradual release model with them that will help them support your teachers. But again, I want to make sure you understand we're not talking about a few teachers. We're talking about a lot of teachers that are going to be involved, all of your teachers, because literacy belongs to us all. Jackie?
Yeah, and the idea too is that this would go much further than 2020. So you would, I know that some people talked yesterday about having sort of a guidebook that they'd built on whatever program they'd been using. I hate to use the word program, but this is the way we do literacy. And when a new teacher comes along, that's what they do. Hey, this is how it works. So this plan is really about figuring out how does our district and our particular schools, how do we do business around literacy? No matter what you teach, what grade level, how do we work with our partners? Just setting all that up so it becomes basically routine. This is the way we do it. So that's really the idea. So when we go back to that, engaging teachers and networks, like that, that's what we're talking about, for that network to keep going and feeding others, even others in other school districts. I mean, you're going to have teacher leaders emerge that are going to be experts in their field.
I muted myself. Okay. All right. Thank you, Jackie. So next it says implementation of an aligned intervention. Okay. So now, this is where we get into that requirement for an intervention. It could be that you already have interventions in place, but we would want to make sure that you're not doing something weird that doesn't align specifically to this district literacy plan. So again, clarification from KDE is on its way. Don't plan right now to go out and spend money on a bunch of interventions. Jackie?
No, and I would really consider this intervention more about how does this go with what we're choosing? How are we differentiating? Mm-hmm. How are we intervening for students along with what we have chosen from our plan? I think that's going to be the main part of this answer. It's not about buying something necessarily, mm-hmm. but this plan for intervention. Also, the district literacy plan includes, as part of that, a look at your data to say what your issues really are. So if you've already made your shopping list for what you're going to purchase and you haven't done that assessment yet, then you, again, have the cart before the horse. You need to make sure that you're implementing a district literacy plan in July, not that you're buying stuff. And it may be that there is an intervention that you're going to add, but that's going to be between you and KDE in July. Okay, so we'll have lots more conversation about that as we go forward. Okay, so curriculum and instruction materials, those may be purchased. It was asked yesterday if you could buy a core program, and I think the answer to that was no. Is that right, Jackie? Let me unmute.
Or was that a clarification?
The answer is really no.
Yeah.
Really, we're talking about the pieces on the matrix.
Mm-hmm.
You also have to look at things specifically, but it sounds like just in general, can I buy this program?
No. Okay, that's my read too, but people ask hard questions sometimes. An assessment system. Now, we don't mean that you have to go out and buy a new assessment system. You should have some assessment systems in place. So if you have a decent assessment in place, if you're an elementary school that's got MAP in place or some other system that's working really well for you, and you can show through your RTI and other things that you're using it appropriately, then you won't have to spend funds on that. We're not saying buy something you already have. Yeah.
Yeah, and people ask questions about, well, we already have this, so can we start paying for
mm-hmm.
assessment or whatever with this new money? And we do have that supplement, not supplant issue there. So be careful there. But again, we would say you're already doing that. You're going to have this money for something else. So just bear in mind when you make those decisions.
Yeah. Exactly. Analyzing, monitoring, and reporting. That's a requirement. And part of that, I haven't mentioned the monitoring piece yet, so I'll mention that here. There will be 600 sites, is what we estimate, 600 sites where this work will be occurring. If you take all the early literacy sites and the elementary sites and the middle school sites and the high school sites, if you take all of that into account, we came up with 600 sites. So in monitoring that's a bear. And the Collaborative for Teaching and Learning is going to be responsible for that monitoring. But, you know, they're not going to do that by themselves. And this is a happy thing. One of the things we hear from teachers most, and from superintendents, I will say, is I really wish my teachers could see other teachers teach. But we can't take them out of the classroom to let them see other teachers teach. Well, guess what? You can. During the monitoring process, we're going to take your identified teacher leaders, and each fall and spring, and I believe it will begin in the spring of 2019, and those teachers will be trained in how to observe in a classroom, and with a rubric, they will monitor. They will be the ones doing the monitoring, collecting the data. So they will be in classrooms, other people's classrooms, watching. And we can see that will be aligned to their area of specialty. Now, does that mean that your teacher from Bullitt County is going to go all the way over to Paducah? No, not necessarily. We anticipate that will be, once we have the award winners identified, that we'll be able to match people up by neighboring districts so that there's not a lot of expense for anybody carrying people back and forth. But those monitoring teams will be your people, our network of teachers who will be in classrooms and observing how literacy is being conducted. And
can you imagine really a better type of, it's a really good type of professional learning as well. I think all of you've experienced it before. I think of student teaching, it kind of felt like that. I'm going in, I've got this really specific purpose, and I have to do that. I think it's going to be a really good experience for teachers in sort of a different role with a different lens.
Yep. All right, so still continuing with required activities, going from the bottom of page 7 over to page 8, actually. Motivating language and text-rich environments. These are some of the things you can spend your dollars on. Gee, I wonder what a text-rich environment is. Oh, that would be more books and stuff for kids, right? So we can see that you would be, as part of your district literacy plan, designing some type of inventory or some type of needs assessment with your birth to 5 to see where those literacy pieces are needed. And so, yes, you may be buying books or puppets or whatever it is that they need at the early learning stages to ensure they are doing what they need to do. I could see that including some activity things with your little bitties, but again, at every level, that's what we're going to be doing. How are we going to make sure we have everything we need? Literacy instructional coaches, and we had, you'll notice here that it says up to 50% of the salary and the fringe for a literacy instructional coach or coaches. There's some clarification coming on that, but yes, you may pay for 50% of an instructional coach. Please check the FAQs on that related to whether we mean you can pay for 100% of a half-time or 50% of a full-time. Now, I can tell you that is not that you can pay for half of the salary of an existing literacy coach. Your existing literacy coach already has a job. They are already doing work. So keep them in place and add someone to support this work. And that you don't have to, but that's something we see as being a benefit to your project.
Part of the issue, of course, with hiring people is when this money's gone, can you sustain, the person? And just, that's not something you probably want to have to experience. But I also will say, as I am getting guidance on this today, it sounds like the less you spend on coaches, the better off that would be. Yesterday, we had a lot of really tricky language around percentages and that kind of thing. And we were trying to be really straightforward about that. We did lay that out. It seemed really simple until we started talking about, well, what ifs? And that's really what this is all about. So please give us the what ifs, but just know that our intention is to really keep that number minimal of hiring coaches.
Yes. Yeah. Certainly, it's not meant for you to provide a coach for every grade, for example, or to have 5 coaches that you're suddenly hiring, unless you're just that big. Okay. So this is meant for those districts who do need that support to give you an option for that. And I might add that pretty much all of your expenditures here are going to be, you're going to need to get those approved by KDE. Does that mean that buying a pencil you need to get approved? No. If you're going to buy something instructional, something that's working, it's going to be approved because it's going to be in your district plan. Okay. So if it's not in that district plan, then that's going to be a challenge for you. That district plan will help you refine your budget when you do that in June and July of this year. Okay, so those will go hand in hand. Now, we'll go through some of the questions and answers that we had during it. Some of them we've already touched on, but it's a planting, can't do it. If you're already doing it and you're paying for it, that's great. You don't need to spend your grant money on it. In fact, you can't spend your grant money on it, which just means you freed up some grant money to do some other things. You must have a minimum number of first to 5 partners with those preschool agencies. Again, keep checking the FAQs. If you have something unusual, if, for example, and a district told us this yesterday, we only have our Head Start and we have one church that does early learning, that is an early learning center. Okay. While some of us, I'm kind of rural, but that was hard for me to, but that may be true. If it is, talk to KDE, make sure that you have some guidance for that. I will be telling the reviewers about that. So please do make sure you get that kind of on the record with Jackie about that. Additionally, there was some clarification we provided about Head Start and your own preschool. So for example, if you have in your district 2 public preschools that are run by the district, okay? So you've got 5 elementary schools and you have 2 of your preschools that feed into those 5. That counts as 2 centers, okay? That counts as 2 of your centers. It's not 1 because they both belong to the district, it's 2. So that clarification was added as well. On page 5 in your RFA, the word center versus agency, I think I clarified as we went through. That number 3 there on page 5 is talking about the centers that you must have, the 357. You should also have other partners, and they will submit partner commitments to you. We'll get kind of to that as we get into the format of the proposal. Evaluation measures. Someone asked, what are those measures? Well, they're the measures you're already collecting. We don't anticipate a lot of big new stuff. There will not be a requirement on your part to employ, use, or implement an evaluator or an evaluation at your level. The evaluation is at the KDE level, and it will include monitoring, as I described earlier, with sets of teachers. It will include some surveys, pre and post. There may be, we may ask for permission to get your data on certain things, and that's going to be it. We do not foresee any type of weird thing that we say, okay, you have to give blood at every grade of every student. Okay, that's not going to happen. Okay, so it's going to be a pretty straightforward evaluation process. The qualifying data and CEP we talked about, it's 65% free and reduced lunch at the high school level based on that qualifying data for 2017-2018.
And in the original, it says, in the RFA, it says, if you are CEP school, contact KDE. And a lot of people have contacted. We've tried to answer those questions. But some people contacted folks, I'm not really sure who they are. So we just wanted to clarify and say only use the qualifying data. That's all we're using. We're not doing any new configurations of numbers or anything like that. The calculations are already there in that data. Another thing to clarify, which you might not have been muddied on anyway, but this is recorded, so someone might have this question. If you look at your school report card, you may say, oh, our free and reduced lunch percentage is much lower. And so the short and easy answer of that, because I've talked to a lot of people about all these calculations, is they're not figured the same. They look at different maybe demographics or who's taking the test versus your complete population, that kind of thing. So it's very simple just to stick with that final qualifying data, just use that, and you'll be in good shape. You look at your high school.
Okay. Let's see. I didn't talk about partner commitment so much because we're going to come back to that. But there are some requirements there for your partners, and I'm going to explain that in the context of the specifics noted here on page 8 and 9. We'll get to that in a bit. Let's do that. All right. So programs that are on the chopping block. We know that there are several things right now that are being faced in the legislature that may or may not be on the chopping block. For example, the Kentucky Writing Project. We don't know if that's going to be funded again. There are a couple of them there, and we will know more in April. So again, right now you're not choosing a program. Right now you're choosing whether to have a district literacy plan that you develop alongside KDE and then implement that in July. So that matrix may change, but that's what it is right now.
So when I'm talking with, I mean, obviously each bit of information we get, and it just feels like it's always just real time. As soon as we get, hey, here's this budget proposal or whatever it is, then we do begin to consider those contingencies. However, when I've spoken to the folks, these providers, what I'm hearing over and over is we're going to make it work. So I don't know all of that for certain, but people are making plans on how to assist these districts. They also know, I mean, if you are chosen and awarded this grant, you're going to have the money to, I mean, they're not trying to make money on this. That's not their goal, but they're trying to provide this service. So I suspect we'll be able to keep things that could have fallen away without the Circle grant.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and Jackie mentioned that in the April session that you come to, there will be additional information about the programs themselves, the pricing, the vendors plan to be there. So there will be full opportunity for you to begin to really get to know and make some better decisions. But that's not what we're talking about today. Okay? In fact, the next bullet goes straight into that. Identifying your chosen programs, that is not what we're doing. Okay, so we want to be clear. And I'm going to tell the reviewers this. If they get a proposal and they're reading a grant and scoring a grant, and it says we will purchase ABC, DEF, and GHI, that is not going to be favorably looked upon, because that's not what this grant's about. This grant is about developing a district literacy proposal, program. And then the funding will help you apply or implement that program. Well, I mentioned this morning must is the word, must all elementaries participate. I will say that was probably the intent of this. There may be an occasional something that keeps you from doing that. If so, you're going to have to make that case, okay, and in your proposal as to why an elementary was left out or as to why a school was selected. I'll show you that criterion in just a bit. And this is some of them called it a formula. This is how we see the participation. In fact, this is from the grant that KDE presented to the Fed, how we see the numbers of teachers who will be involved each year. We looked at the science of participation, and as Jackie said, she would fall into those early adopters. She's one of those that says, "Ooh, new thing, let's do it." And you know you have those in your district, and they're happy to find out what the research says and go in and apply that. So you're going to have probably 25 or 30% of your teachers will be in that group. So they will be in the first summer of PD. Then you're going to have the next group, which will be the next summer. Okay, so we're talking about June, July, August of 2019. And they will be the majority of your teachers. And they will have trainings regionally based on whatever comprehensive strategies you're using. And then finally, in 2020, that last summer, we'll have the late minority. That is the nice way of saying your stragglers. They will be coming in that last summer and will be supported in large part in the 2020 and 2021 school year by your teacher leaders as they continue on. And in fact, I would think that by then it should be embedded. You should be moving forward, and your district literacy plan is just the way you do business at that point.
Yes, and when
That's
I
the plan.
and this was based on, so the writers of this grant looked at implementation science and said this is how implementation typically happens. So I love that it's not unrealistic. I can look at this and basically put faces of people I know. Like I know so-and-so would be here and so-and-so would be one of those late minority. KDE hasn't really used the word stragglers, but that late minority that's waiting to see how things go or whatever that may be. But I think that's important to note that we're trying to be realistic and giving you an idea about how to build capacity. I see the folks over here, those early adopters, the expectation really is that they become part of the providers, that they work with the program providers toward the end of this phase. So imagine if someone is working with LDC, for instance, and then by the time, maybe they go through the national coaching training, and by the time 2019 or 20, then they are nationally certified coaches, and they're helping more than just your district. So that's the idea, is to really build, scale this out as far as possible.
Yeah, and I think all of the providers that are on our matrix, all of them have that gradual release process built into them. That this is supposed to be more than about 2.5 years of professional learning for you. This is about creating a plan, implementing the plan, and sustaining the plan as you go forward. Okay, so we certainly think that that's possible here. All right, so I'm still on page 8, talking about some of the restrictions on the funding. Again, it is based on your district literacy plan. So that plan must be approved before your spending items are approved. That's going to be how your budget is refined.
Definitely. And so part of my job as the program director will be to look at your expenditures or your request. Most of you, or many of you, may not use Munis, but your financial officers will. And we try to be explicit in the codes for Munis. Some of them are really clear that yes, you would use those, but sometimes we said it's not very typical. And sometimes we said you need to talk with someone. So make very sure that you know. I mean, please don't call me every day, but please, make sure you're clear about expenditures, because that could be an issue that could rise if something is spent where it really shouldn't be. So definitely work with your financial officers, but also with me. So that'll be how we handle some of those items.
Great.
And can I say
right.
one thing?
Absolutely.
That'll probably come from the program, the project director at your school. So every person doesn't have to do that. So we'll make that clear. So.
Yeah. All right. Whoops, go back a little bit. Okay, so the plan, again, is going to be developed by your district leadership team. And who's on that team? Everybody across that spectrum of 0 to 5, elementary, middle, and high school. So they'll be members of that. And KDE will be providing you additional guidance for that as they're inviting you to the meeting. There'll be an expectation. One of our questions yesterday was, but wait a minute, it's really hard for somebody from 0 to 5 to leave their preschool on a Tuesday. We get that, and there may be some additional guidance on that. But the idea is that everyone is expected to be at the table. So that's just one of those things. Well, we get it. Having come from the Green River Co-op, I know that we did several things with preschools over the last 3 years, and we did them on Saturdays. And the reason we did that was because that's the day they can come. So it is a challenge.
And part of this literacy, am I on? Okay. Part of the literacy team, so it won't be, everyone that's coming, but part of what we'll be doing is teaching the ones who do come how to take that back to others. So I think we definitely can avoid some of those really tough situations where someone cannot, but they definitely be represented in the school leadership teams as well and need to commit to be there and plan with them. But they may not have to come to Frankfurt, for instance. So we'll be,
right.
That'll work out fine.
All right, so we talked through kind of what the district leadership, that plan development means, what's going to happen in April. So that's kind of what I was getting at on this slide, is that there's we do want to make sure that you understand that calendar process and how that looks. And so KDE will be helping you in developing that plan. All right, so still on page 8, talking about the allocations. Again, the small, that gives you the money chart, as we say, and yeah, they're kind of odd amounts, but there are reasons for that. We had some limits we were sticking in with, and then you'll see the small, medium, and large. Let's say that you have you think you're in the wrong category. Maybe you think you're really a medium and you should be getting more money. That's a conversation to have with KDE, but I will say that a lot of thought went into that. Not only when the proposal was submitted to the USDE, but also in releasing this RFA, a lot of thought was given toward how many kids a school has and those kinds of things. So I'm not sure KDE is going to budge on that, but absolutely have that conversation if you think you're in the wrong category. Larger districts that have more than one high school may submit up to 3 proposals if they're all eligible. So, for example, a Jefferson County and a Hardin County, a Warren County that have, or Davis County, that have more than one school, more than one high school might want to do that. Again, that's totally a district level call.
I want to point this out.
And again,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
In case anyone watching this video has a question, Cumberland County was inadvertently left off that list. They're in the small category. I just wanted to make that clear in case anyone from Cumberland has a question.
Okay, absolutely. And we'll be sure to make that, in the next amendments, that will be updated as well. The funds must be allocated as outlined. So that's that 16-42-42. So what the heck does that mean? I want to see if I've got, no, go back. Okay, go back. There we go. So 16% of your resources of the money for this grant. Well, where did I go? Hang on. Sorry, guys. Don't get dizzy while I'm flipping through. There we go. 16% goes to birth to 5, 42% at the elementary level, and bridging over to middle school, high school. That combination of grades is 42%. And the language is specifically that it's equitably distributed. Okay, so what does that mean? It doesn't mean half of the 42% goes to middle and half of the 42% goes to high school. It could be equitably distributed based on numbers of students or even numbers of disadvantaged students. Okay, so and KDE is not going to stand there with a ruler and say, "Oh, you spent 41.9%." No, we're you're going to be given a little bit of guidance and support there to help you get that right. Okay, this is not a gotcha. This is part of what the federal folks want us to do.
Yeah, it's not meant to be a gotcha. It's meant to be guidance for really where we should be putting a lot of our efforts. I will say this, though, this will be something really particularly, that's not coming out right. I will particularly be looking at this when we do, say, like a desk audit. If I'm looking at your funds, which I have to, that's part of what I'm doing, and making sure things are being spent in the correct place. A lot of that's going to happen in your plan. You're going to outline how things are going to work, but it needs to be real clear that this is how the funds have to be spent. So that's something we'll revisit quite often, probably especially with the financial officers.
Okay, great. All right, now on page 8, and if you don't have your pencil out, get your pencil out, okay? Page 8, we got a couple of things we're gonna talk about in terms of what I call the order of worship on your proposal, okay? So we've got all these letters required, but we didn't quite get all the list of bullets here correct. So we had lots of suggestions yesterday, and because the group in Frankfurt was first, they get to help us design this. So here's how this should really go at the bottom of page 8. So the first page that, let's see, hang on. Oh, let me make sure to get my teacher finger out again. The proposal should be written in this order, no matter what. So let's see, let's look at page 15. Why have I got page 15 over there? Okay, page 15 starts with the cover. Okay, so that's the first page of your proposal, all right? And I always recommend that people do a dummy copy, but we're going to talk through that dummy copy here. So the first page, as noted on page 8, is the form from page 15. Okay, that's page 1. Your next page is actually going to be the district letter of intent. Okay, so that's 1A. If you're making a list, you'll put 1A, your district letter of intent. And if you also want to make a note of what's supposed to be in that district letter of intent, you can flip back over to, I can't find it, of course. We just passed it. On page 6. So on page 6, the bottom half of the page, there's a thing that says letters of interest from the district will, and it shows 2 bullets there, number 1 and number 2. Okay, so there at the bottom of page 8 that we're looking at, the proposal component, if I'm making a list of my order, page 1 is the district cover, the next page is 1A, it's the district letter, and it also notes page 16, the assurances. That's where, that's your principal signature, that comes next, okay? Let me talk again, especially for those of you on our recording. The first page of your proposal is page 15 from your RFA. It's that cover page, and it will be notarized. Okay, so make sure it's notarized. Then you're going to put your district letters. Okay, that would be the districts from the superintendent, signed by the superintendent, that will include items 1 and 2 from page 6. Yes, Jackie?
And we're going to call it 1A.
1A. That's what we're calling it because we're messed up. Item 2, the next page, will be your principal and partner page. So it's going to be page 16. Okay? And by partner there, we mean your schools, your school partner. So page 16 comes next. If it makes sense to you, mark through the word partner and just say your principal signature page. Number 3, and next in order, is your school council signature page, page 17. Okay. Whoops,
Yeah, there are a few districts that do not have site-based councils, so you just make a note of that. Typically, when that happens, you have the superintendent to sign off on that.
Right. Yeah, if I were doing it, I would put the page in there, and I would make a note that our district does not have site-based council. Yeah. All right, so after the school council has this page is item 4, page 18, and that page 18 are the partner signatures. After that, 4A will be the letters from those partners, okay? So that would be your early learning center, it could be your library, it could be any of the partners that you have. And I might want to say any and all of the partners that you have. Now, a word about that. You're required to have minimum numbers of early learning centers. You're not necessarily, I don't think, and Jackie, correct me if I'm wrong, required to have a certain other number of partners. But here's what I'll tell you. A good proposal will not include 100 partners, okay? Nobody's going to believe you if you bring 100 attachments with letters in it. That's just too much. What we would rather see in a high quality proposal is we would rather see authentic, real, sincere, quality partnerships. Okay, so don't run around. And I love when my Friskies run out and they get all these partners together because they can and they have them. But here we want to have partners that are going to help you with your comprehensive literacy. You know, we've mentioned the library a couple of times because they're a logical partner. Your career technical center may be a logical partner for you. But, you know, I'm not sure McDonald's is a logical partner here. They may be great for getting, you know, sacks of burgers when you're having a teacher meeting, and they're that kind of partner. But we don't necessarily need to see a letter from them saying that. So what we want are those authentic, good, high-quality partners. In fact, it's almost a red flag to me when I see 200 letters in a grant proposal. How thoughtful were you in describing that? So just be thoughtful there on those partners. Okay, so I'm going to recap page 8. Number 1 is your cover sheet. 1A is your district letter that has those 2 bullets on there. Item 2 is page 16, the principal signatures. Item 3 is your school council signature list. Item 4 are your partners and their CEOs or executive directors who are signing off on that. 4A are the letters from those partners. And then number 5 is your district narrative. That's your narrative, the 25 pages you're going to write. And that's page 1, oddly enough. So you've got page, then page 1. And you'll have up to 25 pages of narrative there. Okay. So now we're on page 9, still looking at our list. Item number 6 is a district budget summary. We don't have that. So just cross that off. Sometimes KDE includes a form for that. We didn't really do that this time. So just mark through the district budget summary. Item number 7 will come next. Okay, so you're going to have 25 pages of narrative, and then you're going to have item 7, your district budget. That is page 19 from your attachment. And I'll talk more about that in just a little while. The next item is 8, your birth to 12th grade feeder system form. That's page 20. Okay. Now, notice we had a question about page 20, so flip over there if you will. Excuse me. The right-hand column on page 20, I'll let everybody get there. And as I take a sip of my Mojo juice here. On page 20, you'll see the 2 columns at the right that says projects and Kentucky, so the percentage meeting benchmark. This is not talking about what you hope to meet. It's what your programs are meeting currently with the work that they do. They may or may not have something to put in there. Let me give you an example. Let's say that the Foundry Preschool Center here in Bowling Green is one of the partners on this grant. Okay, so they'll be in the comprehensive literacy. Well, they have collected some data that says the percentage of their students meeting benchmark. They would be able to complete that. Now, my library, on the other hand, they might not have any benchmarks for what they're doing. On the other hand, they could. And if they do, please put those there. All right, so that's kind of what we're talking about for that spot. So back to page 9. After you have the feeder system. Oh, go ahead, Jackie.
I'm sorry. I was just going to see, Roland, I don't know if you heard what we were just talking about, if you had anything else you wanted to add about that benchmark question we had about your partners that are in there.
No, I think Jackie, John hit that one on the head. I think the issue is you're going to have some projects that you're working with that are going to have benchmark data, and others may have implementation data, and so it's purely an issue of depending on how the project was designed and funded. So, for instance, Gear Up, if your district is participating with Gear Up, they will have a benchmark data, but some other projects may just have input data. So you can at least say, this project has worked with 75 students during the summer of 2017 on summer reading program. You won't necessarily know the impact, but at least you'll know the extent, what's the word I'm looking for? The extent of the impact that the project is having.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roland. All right, so number 8 is that feeder system, and you're going to have that full list there. Number 9, which has an A, B, C, D under it, there's a little correction we want to have there. It's letters of interest from each participating school, and so note the word school. Okay, so you've had letters from your partners. Now you're going to have letters from your school, and the letters from the school should address these 4 things. So just like you had letters before that had 5 bullets, and you have a district letter that has 2 bullets, now you have a school letter that has these 4 bullets. Okay, make sure that each of your schools has a letter that corresponds back accordingly. Those come next. And then the last item in your stack of items is that GEPA statement. And truly, it's going to be less than a page, most likely. It's okay if it's 2 pages or 3 pages, that's fine. But a page is probably sufficient for that. Okay. Again, this will be part of the amendments. So when you see an amended RFA, maybe it will say amendment number 2 or something. Those will be included coming up. It's not posted yet, but it will be. That whole order will be hopefully updated.
And Jonna, just to be clear, I have a 1A and a 4A added.
Yes, exactly. There's a 1A, a 4A. The 1A is the letters from those partners. The 4A, the 1A is the district letter. The 4A are the partner letters. And then item number 6 is removed.
Thank you.
Okay. And again, anytime I do a grant, I do a dummy copy because this can be confusing, and I would rather concentrate my efforts on writing a great proposal than getting the paper in the right order. So I just, go ahead and do that. Get some blank paper and write these things on the top, and stick in 25 pieces of blank paper if you want to. That way you'll know this is how this is supposed to look when I get done. And again, your narrative begins on page 1. You get a total of 25 pages up to, and we'll be going through that formatting, I think, right now. So on page 9, in the middle of the page, it talks. Yeah, go ahead, Jackie.
Oh,
I can't hear you, Jackie.
There you go. Now can you hear me?
There you go.
Narrative page 1 is page 1. You're going to say that again, correct? Okay, never mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Narrative page 1 is page 1. So you should have 1 through 25, and then you're going to have your budget and anything that follows that. Okay. So narrative page 1 is page 1. And so write it in the order. Your 25 pages should be written in the order noted on page 11, beginning on page 11. Okay, so you're gonna go through these criteria, and we'll review those briefly in just a bit. You're gonna double space your proposal, 12-point font, and either Times New Roman or Arial. No narrow fonts. Okay? The margins will be 1 inch, and you'll be limited to 25. If you write 26 pages, KDE will instruct the reviewers not to read the 26th page. So if you write 26 pages, guess what? Whatever's on page 26 isn't going to be read, number 1. And number 2, you have just done this terrible thing called pissing off your reader. The thing happens in grants all the time. It's your number 1 thing not to do. Don't piss off your reader. Okay, so don't write too many pages. And I'll tell you, I have been in several reviews in the past year and a half That's the first thing that people do. They flip through to see if you went over the page limit. Don't do it. Don't do it. My words are precious, but I'm telling you, I can cut me, you can cut you. So you get it down to 25. Okay. Also, charts and graphs may be single spaced and 10 point, but don't put everything in chart or graph. Not everything it should be. And bullets may be single spaced, but they'll be 12 point. Jackie?
I'm just going to say that some states are asking their proposals be no more than 5 pages. So think about how thoughtful,
Wow.
yeah, someone would have to be very careful with their language and concise. So that does happen, but that doesn't mean you need to go, overboard with fluff
Right.
to fill 25 pages.
Mm-hmm. Right. And this is a new competition, which is one of the reasons that we are finding and making some amendments to the RFA. If we'd done this program for 10 years, we probably would have gotten it better the first time. So we're, the 25 pages is a best estimate that will be sufficient. It may be that you only need 20. So by all means, write what you need. Just be thorough and concise at the same time. Again, don't cram too much stuff into a chart. Nobody likes to read a bunch of text shoved into a little space. So be nice to your reader. It is. I don't think that it's a coincidence that our websites now have less text on them than they used to. The reason is that we don't like text that much. So don't force your reader to read a whole bunch of tiny text. Be kind to them. All right, so page 10 talks about the technical assistance, also about the submission. Let me go back to the technical assistance. And you may attend any of those phone calls that you want, any or all of those, and you may continue to send in your questions. Submission is covered on page 10. How do you submit your proposal? It is by email, and it is to the KDE RFA address by March 2nd at 4 p.m. Eastern. Again, give some time for it to get through the firewall. You're going to scan or save your document as a single document, and you're going to send that as that single file and use the nomenclature, the naming of the file as outlined here on page 10. After you submit, feel free to take a walk around your agency, high five your colleagues, say a prayer, whatever your bent is there. I'm usually just finding more coffee at that point. And then you may feel free to email KDE and say, hey guys, did you receive my proposal? They are not going to open it and say, it's beautiful, we love it, we're going to just send you a check for the money now, but they will say, yes, we've gotten it. Also, this proposal is due on a Friday, and depending on how that falls and how staffing is at KDE, it could be that the grants branch is not actually there that day. So if you don't get an email back right away, don't panic, but you'll probably get one Monday. And they have an alternate schedule for Fridays in the grants branch.
I did have a question that came up. And first of all, I want to say, if you're not looking in the chat, I forgot to mention that earlier, but you can see people are sending me private questions. I'm just making them public so we all can see the question and the answer. Paul had a question about blind copies, so you can talk about that if you'd like to. But we're going to save this chat as well. But anyway, if you're not at the bottom of your screen, I believe you can click on chat and you can see all the chat that we've had.
Great. Okay, I'm going to pull that up. Can I? Yeah, I can. Okay, great. Yes, you are not required to do blind copies. Okay, so, and what is a blind copy? It's where you go through and black out all the pertinent information about who your principal is, who your school is. No, these are fully open. Your reviewers will be signing a confidentiality statement that says that they first pinky swear that they have no bias against any of the ones they read, nor will they tell anything about stuff that they read. In addition, KDE typically will give folks items to review that are not from their home districts or even their home region. So if one of my reviewers is one of my friends out of Campbellsville, she's not likely to get something out of Campbellsville. She's not going to be reading that. She's going to be reading Paducah or maybe Pikeville. So that's how KDE tries to do that. And I'm very happy that there will be no blind copies. All right, so what do you write? You write page 11 through 14. These are your open response questions, and you'll write your up to 25 pages on that. It's what we call the narrative. Each criterion there is worth points. Most are worth 10 points. We'll be looking at that. If you miss a bullet, you miss a point. You miss more than 1 point, in fact. So I'd always like to think that I start with 100 points, and if I do well on every one of them, I keep that 100 points. But you'll need to make sure that you explain each of these areas and each one of these criteria. Don't skip around. Don't say, oh, well, I've already answered that one, so I don't have to answer it again. Well, again, you can set your pants on fire if you like. But in this section, you want to be very clear. In fact, I'm going to number mine. So looking at page 11, if I'm looking at part 1, I'm going to, on my 25 pages narrative, I'm going to start with maybe part 1 and a header, and then I'm going to put 1.1. Describe the current literacy needs. I may put 1.1 literacy needs. Then I'm going to put 1.2 disadvantaged students and young children. And then I'm going to talk about that. Then 1.3, let's see, selection of partners. That's where I'm going to describe it. Okay. So I'm going to make sure that my reader finds each of those. Now, often, not just occasionally, often these criteria look as if they're repetitive. Well, let me tell you, they're not. Typically, they're not. They may be nuanced. That's a great word. They may look similar. They may feel similar. But if you get 2 criteria that you think say the exact same thing, I encourage you to put them side by side and dig deeper to see if they are. In fact, when I'll show you a strategy I have for making sure I get everything in the right spot, because you want to explain things where they should be explained. Okay? And so we'll try to help you with that. But don't skip something just because you may think, well, I've already said that. In fact, and I said this multiple times yesterday, you have one job with this grant proposal, and that is to communicate. That's it. Why are you, as a district, worthy? I don't particularly like that word, but why are you worthy of this proposal? Are you capable of developing a district literacy plan? Are you capable of implementing that plan? Okay. Not have you developed a good literacy plan, but are you capable of developing that in the April through June timeframe? And that's your one job, to show us that in your proposal. Okay. So again, be clear, not big words, not edu-speak. I know it's hard in education. We are all the time trying to disaggregate for the individual needs of each and every child so that they may learn at the level to which their God-given talents will take them. We say that, but I don't want to read it. And so let's try to just use simple words, simple words. As a person who's been writing professionally since I was in my teens, I've earned a living as a writer since in my teens. It's kind of crazy. But we've always talked about not writing at a collegiate level. We should be writing at an 8th grade level. Well, I recently met someone at a conference who writes at a 6th grade level, and I'll tell you, he makes about 3 times what I make. So I'm starting to embrace that 6th grade level myself. That's kind of tough. But what that means for you is short sentences, not long sentences, smaller words, not bigger words. Okay, so how do we really speak clearly? Can it be understood by anyone? That's what we're getting at when we discuss that. So what about your audience? To whom are you writing? Well, that's one of the most important things about grants. But you're writing to these 3 people who will be on the review panel. The review panel often includes people of different backgrounds, different skill sets. So, for example, a review panel may have a grant geek like me, okay, somebody who does grants. The second person on the panel may be a preschool teacher. Wow, that would be interesting, huh? Or it could be somebody from your CEC, from an area early childhood council. It could be that your third reader might be an elementary school teacher or a high school teacher or a university professor who is in the early learning program. So when I write this proposal, I need to consider that. I need to consider who's going to be there. Now, they will meet face-to-face in March, and I will take them through a training very similar to what we did yesterday, very similar to what we're doing now, and we will practice scoring. We will read some text together so that they are prepared for reading your proposal and scoring it. So if they're the audience, what do you need to know about them? Well, first off, you need to know that KDE is not on the scoring panel. My colleagues would come to me and say, hey, we really need to put this in the grant because the commissioner loves it when we say this. Well, no offense to the commissioner, but he's not going to read this, so you don't need to worry about that, okay? You meet the requirements and you've made KDE happy, but write in really clear English when you're writing your grant proposal to a teacher, to a grant professional, to a university faculty member who may be in the methods program. Okay? So they will be 3 people who will be on a really tight deadline. They may not be really familiar with the CIRCLE program, with this comprehensive literacy program. We will give them some background knowledge, but you need to also, as you're thinking about your proposal, understand that simple is better, explain things is better than using the big words and big educational lingo. I always put this in there. They're not necessarily smart. I don't mean necessarily that they're not smart. They're just not smart about what you're talking about. They may not know that preschoolers in your region have been faced with their parents being unemployed due to the loss of coal. I don't know. They may not know exactly what you're talking about. So you need to be sure you tell them, or they'll just infer or think you don't know what you're talking about. They'll be on a deadline to read. They'll be reading solid for about 24 hours. So be nice to them, okay? You need to understand that what they're facing. They'll read 10 to 12 proposals. And your proposals are going to be 25 pages plus all those letters. And they have to read those and score them and provide you with comments or feedback on your proposal over the course of 2 days. And they'll be kind of semi-sequestered while they do that. So if your proposal is bad or if it went over the page limit, they still have to read it. And there's nothing worse than reading a bad grant proposal. So please be nice to them. I would model a review. It's a little difficult to do from here, but basically they're going to flip through your proposal at first. Grant proposals are not books. So don't have the expectation that they're going to open your proposal at page 1 and continue to page 2 and then to page 3. They'll probably come back around to that. But many proposal readers will go to the back and start with the budget, for example, to see what the budget tells them. So that's interesting, right? So it better align to whatever you said. Also, they may look to see if you have a lot of letters or an appropriate number of letters. Okay, so they're going to be checking that as they go through. Again, write your narrative in the order beginning on page 11 of those evaluation criteria. Be careful with your acronyms. With acronyms, the standard thing is to spell out the acronym first, spell out all the words first, and then put it in parentheses after. If you are doing a 25-page proposal, though, I might also come back in around page 7 or 8 and put in the acronym description again, because if you've ever been reading a long text and you come across that acronym on page 12, you may go, oh man, I forgot what that meant, and now you're searching backwards trying to figure out what that meant. Right? So I try to put that in again about halfway through. Again, use titles or numbers when you're doing your criteria here. So 1.1, 2.3, 3.4. And I never, ever, never skip For example, there's one or two on here where your answer may be no, we don't have that, or no, we didn't do that. I still would put the number in and put that answer. Jackie, did you have something there?
I mean, I
saw.
I had a question that came up that how many proposals do you anticipate? I really don't know. I anticipate all of them. I have no idea.
Yeah. I would say if you really want to know that number, if you're trying to figure out where to put your resources, if you would go to the qualifying data, you could quickly figure out how many high schools are eligible in Kentucky, and you could get to the number that are eligible. That'll get you a starting place. Right? So I think our group yesterday, and that's not me and Jackie, I think the people in our room yesterday thought that your odds were about 1 in 3 of winning. Okay, so maybe 100 applications, I don't know. Well, that's a total guess on the part, not of me and Jackie, but on the part of the people in the room yesterday. Yeah. The great question, though, it's one I ask every time. All right, this is responsive writing. It's not a novel. So these are criteria you're going to read through. Try not to use flowery language, okay? Don't use a lot of adjectives, and don't copy and paste technical mumbo jumbo. That happens a lot when we have intervention grants in particular. People go out to the website, they clip a piece off, and they just slap it in there. Try not to do that. That's really, And don't use an introductory sentence that says nothing. Okay, I'm going to give you a couple of examples of that. But for example, if you've just put part 1 literacy needs, you don't need to have a sentence that says, we have lots and lots of literacy needs in our county. No, you don't have to say that. Okay, don't use up your space for that. Okay? So here's a poor example. Our students are very poor and come from broken homes where parents can't read and therefore can't get good jobs. That's whining, okay? And so if I was playing my videos today, you'd get a nice Snickers video where it's just whining. Don't whine. Instead, give some data. Nearly 90% of our students receive free and reduced lunch. Of that number, 37% read at least 2 grade levels below their more affluent peers. This is a trend within our adult community as well, etc. And so I'm not whining about our poor kids. I'm just stating the facts. Our kids are poor. Okay? And here's another not so good example.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Lots of people could make that statement about poverty, but those facts make it, it gives you those degrees, but also it's something that the reviewer can really lay hold of.
Exactly. And this is another not so good example. Students arrive at kindergarten without the necessary skills to be successful at reading. Parents simply don't know what's required to get their children ready for learning at the elementary school. And now, first thing, that really doesn't say a lot. Second thing, that second sentence just threw parents under the bus. Let me be clear. I don't know exactly who's going to read your proposal, but I'm 90% sure they're a parent, okay? Because if they're of an age where KDE has selected them to review proposals, they're going to most likely be over the age of 30, and they're probably going to be parents just because 90% of people in education are parents. So don't throw parents under the bus. You can get at that a little differently. This is a little better. Half of all students arriving at Lovely County Elementary are not kindergarten ready. And I cite the Brigant. In fact, 83% of students qualifying for free or reduced lunch miss the readiness mark, a trend that has ranged from 75 to 85% over the past 5 years. Okay? So don't throw your parents under the bus. You won't make friends. So beginning with the end in mind, this is an exercise I took folks through. I'm not going to take you through it today. I'll let you think on this on your own time. It's what is this district change going to look like? Okay, what is it going to look like if you actually implement a really great district literacy plan? Okay? How is that going to look? Did you say something, Jackie?
Yes, something that when I take people through this sort of thinking about whatever problem of practice we might be speaking of, we think about it as our preferred vision of the future, which is kind of a nice way of really saying, well, if it were, this is how it would look. And it's a nice way to build our goals, our vision, that sort of thing.
It really does help to again, like going back to that piece on page 2 where you're looking at the purpose, really helps to get your mind refocused as you're going through that. Let's see here. All right, so let's look at a couple of things related to our criteria on 11 through 14. These are open response questions. They're questions written in sentence form. We're in education, we've seen this before, right? And this guides the writing of your narrative, the writing of your 25 pages. You get points for each criterion. You could lose points if you don't completely answer it. So we want to make sure that you think through each part of this. Now, this is something that I do for every grant I write, period. I go out to those criteria and I copy and paste them into a Word document. And then for each of the criteria, I put some space in between. So I've got a 5 or 6 page document that well, actually more like 10 pages on this grant that has blank spaces in between. Okay. And so from that, I am able to then take my big fat number 2 pencil and start making notes in there. This is what I think goes in this space. So then as I develop kind of that outline within my outline, okay, this becomes my outline for writing. As I develop that, I can shift the content around as it might fit better here and not so well here. I have a friend who does this on the wall. That she will take chart paper and put the big header for that section up on the wall and take her Post-it notes and say, oh, this is where I write about this. And that way she can, again, shift the things where they may be more natural. They may flow better in a different place. And so again, some of these feel repetitive. I challenge you to examine whether they actually are repetitive, okay? I find they generally are not. So they just kind of feel that way sometimes. Jackie?
Jonna, you just described some really good literacy skills for writing, so thank you.
I tell you, I'm slow, but you know, I get it eventually. It might have taken me 56 years to get that, but we're there. All right, so looking at those 10 sections you're required to write to, these are found on 11 through 14. Pages 11 through 14, and each one of those sections need to be addressed. Now, you don't need to actually write anything about those required attachments, but you will notice that that is noted in here. It is an expectation of this proposal, so this must be there. You must have those attachments. So let's look at it a little bit. Again, they're all required. I consider this a checklist. When I sit down with people to plan my proposal, I start with these bullets, because I need to know the answers to each of these questions. So it might be that number 1, I know the answer to, but maybe 3.2, I haven't got a clue how to answer that. Well, I'm gonna sit somebody down who's smarter than me, who knows more about literacy than me. Maybe they know more about the RTI process we have right now, and I'll sit down with them and say, okay, so tell me what I should put in this space. So that's kind of how I use it. To facilitate the writing, not just because I have to write it in that order, but as an actual tool to facilitate the thinking. I also, and I'm going to look at an example from page 13. It's what I would call 9.4. So it's in the budget section, item number 4. And you'll see on the screen, it lists that out, describe historic support, coordination and alignment of programs or projects with other programs and funding sources having a literacy component. Okay, so, all right, so we're talking about programs that have a literacy component. Again, we're going to take it apart. Okay, so there's the word describe. Okay, it doesn't want me to list on this one or identify, just describe. Then we're going to look at the historic support. Historic. What have we done in the past about this? Now, not everything you've done, but some of the things that are aligned. And then how is it coordinated? Have you coordinated that? How is it aligned to the programs and projects and to the other funding sources that you've had? Okay, so we're breaking that apart. Every time you read a criterion, you're going to break out those extra words You're going to look at each section, because guess what? If I talk about just the historic support and I don't talk about the coordination or the alignment, then I miss part of that. Okay, so the budget section's worth 10 points, and you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bullets there. So kind of those bullets are worth 2 or 3 points apiece, depending on how the reader looks at it. And if I only talk about district historic support, I'm not going to get a good score on that particular point. I'm not going to get 2 full points or 3 points. I'm going to get a point. Okay, so that's kind of the way I think of it when I'm writing. I'm going to answer each and every part of that sentence as fully as possible. Okay, so flip forward another page. Flip to 2.2. So part 2, bullet 2. And I want you to kind of think through some of the important words on this one. I'm just going to let you look at that for a second.
And you can type them into the chat box if you like.
Yep. You see there that anytime you got a comma, you got extra thoughts, right? So you're going to identify. So this time you're not necessarily going to describe fully, but you could, as long as you identify your current literacy programs, not what you're going to buy, and don't whine about what you want to buy. Well, we would buy this, but we've just not had any money. Nope, just identify what you have. And there are programs, services, and supports. Those could be 3 separate things. Okay, do you want to describe those that are provided by your community partners, particularly the services for young children from birth to age 5? Okay, you're going to take that apart. Every time you write to a criterion, take it apart. Okay, make sure you know what it says at each phase. So with your team, you can use that criteria as a graphic organizer, and you're going to respond as specifically to each one as you can. No whining, no flowery language, just be clear and concise with your detail. Okay. Now I want to show you a different way of looking at those 10 parts. I know we're coming up on the top of the hour, and I still want to talk about some things, so hang with us. It's hard to put an all-day training into 3 hours, and we're working on it. So if you look at your evaluation criteria from another point of view, let's look at it from the points value. Now, this is something that Jonna does. This is my opinion. This helps me think about which parts of the proposal are the most important. Well, if you'll notice there, it should be fairly clear to you which ones KDE thinks is most important. It's your capacity around professional learning. It's worth twice as many points. Well, what does that mean for me? Well, it could mean that it's worth twice as many pages when you start writing. And that's what I mean by this is Jonna's opinion here. When I sit down with a set of criteria, I look at about how much each section is worth, and so how many pages should Jonna be writing. Now, this is not a hard and fast rule. Do not go back and say, Jonna said we had to have 2.5 pages on the needs. No, because in truth, I know me. I love me a needs section. I'm going to write 3 pages on the needs section. I can pretty much promise you that. But it gives you a way of seeing, especially if you're working with a team, about how much weight should be there. If you get through with your professional learning section and it's only 2 pages long, you might want to go back and say, Jonna said that was an important section. I might want to put a little more weight there. Also, it will help you in working with your friend Judy down the hall. You know, you're going to ask Judy to write the section on response to intervention. And Judy, who loves response to intervention, will want to write you 10 pages. Well, you don't need 10 pages. You need 2 or 3 pages. So give her that heads up and say, hey, I think I'll need 2 or 3 pages. So don't write more than that because I'm going to have to cut it if you do. Okay. So that gives you a way to plan as well. And again, professional learning here has the most value. I don't think that's a fluke. That should be a big red flashing sign for you. Okay. Now, I think here, okay, This is when we've been going through the criterion one by one before we get to the budget section. Jackie, I'll ask you for the sake of time, do you want me to do that, or do you want me to keep going, or you want me to just skip on over to the budget?
I think it could be helpful because you just never know who's going to see this. So yeah, let's just keep on.
Yeah, the record. We'll keep on going. And if somebody needs to get off the call, please know that we're going to keep going, and it'll be posted, and you can fast forward, I believe, usually you can on these things, to the section that you need. Okay, so fair enough. All right, so we're on page 11, and we're going to start with the literacy and pre-literacy needs. And I'm just going to kind of read through a couple of these and throw some thoughts out. So this is really a chance for you to read along with me and to go through this, so that if you have questions as they come up, you can send those to Jackie. Okay. So literacy and pre-literacy needs. This is sort of your needs assessment for where you are with your literacy in your district. So the first one, describe the current literacy need and trends of young children and students from birth to 12 who will be served by the project. And it needs to be based on reliable and valid data. Provide evidence to demonstrate it in a compelling need. Now, I don't know what compelling is, but I always know when I don't see it. Okay, that's the whining. Okay, yeah, and so be careful that you make sure you have data. You may not have a lot of data for preschool. Well, you do have the Brigance. You do know that whatever kids are doing from 0 to 5, half of them aren't making it to kindergarten readiness. Okay, so you can look at that. You can also really dive into that Brigance. There are several different sections of that to see what's there, to see what you need to be improving. The idea there is that you know what's wrong. Go ahead, Jackie.
Something to think about here. So early childhood is not my expertise area at all. As an English teacher, so I've been learning a lot about what pre-literacy needs are and what literacy looks like for children, for young children. And because to me, it looks like a book, and I'm turning pages. So you want to make sure that you're speaking with your early childhood expert on that. And trust me, I've been spending a lot of time with ours.
It looks quite different, doesn't it? My daughter was saying the other day that Adelaide said they'd spent a lot of time skipping. They were skipping everywhere in her 4-year-old program, and I just laughed and I said, "Yeah, that's one of the indicators. That's one of those gross motor skills for kindergarten readiness." And she said they teach them to skip, and I'm not sure it's explicitly taught, but they model skipping and they skip. It's part of growing up. It's part of being ready for school. So, but I had to laugh. They taught her to skip? What? All right, so let's look at 1.2. Describe the disadvantaged students and young children to be served. Again, it wants a description of who you're going to be serving. And if you don't know that, you need to find out. Okay, so who are those young children? Who are the kids you're going to serve in your school? 1.3, describe the process and criteria the district used to select participating schools and partners. Okay, now this is where you need to be thinking about all of your schools and whether they should be participating. Okay, so let me back up to an actual example. Let's say that you have more than one way to get from elementary to middle to high in your district. Okay, that's fine. If you've got 3 middle schools that feed into 2 high schools, does that make sense? Okay, so it's hard to always track where all the kids are going. That's fine. You're supposed to be describing or utilizing in your district plan the most logical feeder pattern. Okay, not perfect, the most logical. If you did not include a school, an elementary school, a middle school, this is where you describe why you didn't. Okay. If the answer to the question is, well, we did not include Lovely County Elementary because they didn't want to participate, I think I'd say more. I think I'd say more about why they didn't want to participate and get very specific about that. because if it's not a good answer, you're going to lose points here. Okay. And not only that, this needs section is the very first part of your proposal. Your reader is making decisions about you based on this very thing. So I would want that to be as strong as possible, that yes, you're going to have a district comprehensive literacy plan. Now, the next one is still within that. And by the way, that 1.3 talks about the process. Okay, so describes the process used. So not just that you chose them, what was the process that you used? Did the district come together and have meetings related to which schools? Did the principals attend? Were there literacy specialists there? Describe that process. On the other hand, if you are a small district and you have an elementary, middle, and high, just describe that. It's that you have an elementary, middle, and high. You met to determine whether you should apply for the funding, and move on. Okay, you don't have to spend a lot of time describing that. That last one then again is explain why the district did not select some schools and partners. Okay, and notice both schools and partners. Okay, not just your schools, but your partners. Why? What was the thinking that you had about that? You know, for some of you, it may have to do with rurality. That you are rural, and you know, that it's just not a possibility to make that match. I don't know, but you should have some reasons there. Part 2, current and historic literacy services, and I want to stress that again. It's your current services. What are you doing? This is to show that you know what you're doing, that you've been doing some good work. So 2.1, identify the current literacy programs, services, and supports provided to students in participating schools in those systems, okay? So 3 things: programs, services, and support. Number 2, identify the current literacy program, services, and supports provided by your partners and how they're working with young children, okay? But wait a minute. Does that mean we have to have a discussion with our partners? Yeah, it does. Yep, got to do that. Yeah.
You know, John, I also envision going through all of this, having these conversations, and imagine, let's say you did all of these things and did them well, and you weren't awarded the grant. It's still a very good thing to have happened and to help move forward with the whole community of learners that we're talking about here. So I think that sort of makes it a win-win in a lot of ways. Definitely makes it a win-win. I can't hear you. Oh, okay.
Okay, got it. I was saying that I was multitasking. I'm just letting my husband know to feed the grandkids, you know. So appreciate that, all you people who are out there listening to me type here. Got it. All right. Back to my business here. So, and looking then at part 2, again, we're looking at 2.1, 2.2. So what are the historic things we've provided? What are the historic and current things our partners have provided? And then the third one, describe current and past efforts to align these services in a comprehensive manner. Okay, some of you may have already done this work before. You may have tried to do it, and it may or may not have worked out very well. Well, you're going to put that tail here. And if I can only speak for me, if I were to write about this, and maybe we crashed and burned with a plan, and maybe it was difficult, I would say, you know, we needed additional professional learning support, or we needed additional time to make this happen, and just could not secure that time. I'd be pretty honest about that. I'd put it out there and say, you know, we now see the value of it. We are going to be able to have the time and the support from KDE to manage that now in this process. Okay. Part 3, district support and commitment. This is your current commitment to this current district and literacy plan. Clearly demonstrate strong district commitment. That goes back to the quality of that letter that you had, that you are going to have a local literacy team that's going to be working. You are going to work toward the birth to grade 12 continuum. 3.2, the district will provide ongoing support to that leadership team. I don't know what that means. Give some examples of what you've done in the past. In the past, when we've had large initiatives, our district has ensured the time, tools, and talents to make sure it happens, and then give a couple of examples of that. And then finally, assure in your proposal that you will meet the 16, 42, and 42 alignment of funds. Now, again, that alignment of funds is to make sure, it's really to require you to spend funding on specific areas. And so you're pinky swearing when you submit that you're going to do that. Part 4 is about your partners, and it's about those letters. So very, very quickly, 4.1, appropriate partners are identified, first part of it, and each has provided a letter as required. Okay, you've identified them and you have those letters. Partner letters of interest clearly describe each partner's commitment to the project, including, and here are those 5 bullets that we outlined for those partnerships: the historic relationship, how the staff will be involved. Number 3, how parents will be involved. Number 4, the types of support related to professional learning and leadership. And number 5, the partner's commitment to the project, including any prior work in literacy that they've done. This would include them participating as part of your district leadership team, or at least having a delegate who will commit to that. Part 5, current and historic response to intervention. Okay, so now this question comes up for those of you who've done the RTA and also the math grants had a question similar to this. It's not asking what will you do for RTI once you're funded. It's asking what do you do right now related to RTI? What's that process? How are kids selected and served? Do they move in and out of the supports that are provided? Does every child get support? What does that committee structure look like? Who serves on that RTI committee? So that's where the RTI section is really getting to, is a description of how that works. What assessments are you using? The next one, 5.2 says, describe how schools and districts currently address and remedy risk factors for targeted students. So, okay, one thing, tell me what your risks are. You know, people who are at risk, I don't know what that means. Okay, at risk of what? At risk of the flu? Are you going to fix the flu? I'd love for you to. But what are they at risk of? And you're going to address. So I would just sit down and think about, we got ELL, we've got students with disabilities, we've got poverty students, we've got all these types of students. And so how do we actually target that? What are some of our, how are we going to address it? Then you have that big section, section 6, part 6, that has 5 bullets there. So each one of those bullets is worth about, about 4 points each? Yep. So describe the current professional learning needs of school-based educators and education partners, including pre-literacy and comprehensive literacy strategies. Oh my, that's a big criterion. You know, that's tough. How do you know, and this is something I stress for you, how do you know you have a professional learning need? You need to describe that and tell me why you know that. Okay. Let me give you a weird example. If I was writing an obesity grant, I would describe my need for professional learning in obesity based on the numbers of people I have who are obese. Okay. That would be one way of doing it. I might also look at the data related to professional learning that my teachers or others have had. If, for example, I'm working with a community partner that's never had any professional learning in early childhood strategies, yet they're supposed to be helping kids get to kindergarten ready, I think that's a gap in services, a gap in the professional learning. That would be a way to identify that. 6.2, describe the current literacy professional learning provided within the partner school. So what are you doing? Okay, what are you already doing there? Number 3, describe the current process for evaluating the impact of that learning. Okay, so let's review. 6.1, what's your need with professional learning? 6.2, what are you doing to meet that need? And 6.3, what are you doing to assess that you've met that need? Okay. And then 6.4, demonstrate the allocation of time and other resources currently provided to support intensive and ongoing professional learning that includes, at a minimum, deliberation, dialogue, and discussion. Wow. Okay, so you're going to have to describe that. Now, I will tell you, we had someone who said, okay, so what's the difference between dialogue and discussion? There's nothing so much a difference there. You're okay to consider that one thing. But it does have to meet some of the robust standards for professional learning that we know KDE supports. And if you need to know that, there are some standards on the KDE website that will talk about these very things, that needs to be embedded, it needs to include discussion, all of that. 6.5, describe the historic roles of classroom teachers and school administrators in ongoing professional learning. Okay, so both of those, teachers and administrators. This is a network grant where we're going to be developing or building up these teachers in certain ways, and they're going to be working together, especially on that monitoring piece. So it's a good way to demonstrate if you've done something like that. Let's see, part 7. Capacity for continued success and improvement. All right, so this is sort of that sustainability section we all hate, because you know, if I had money to do a program, I wouldn't need money and wouldn't be writing the grant in the first place. So thinking about that, let's look at 7.1. Demonstrate the district's capacity to implement successful short-term programs with great effort. I think that one's pretty straightforward. You know, what have you done in the past and how successful was it? And you don't have to list everything you've ever done, but pick a few. Pick 2 or 3 that you've done that you can demonstrate that. The next sentence, provide specific examples of sustained initiatives within. So stuff you have sustained, particularly with multi-school and multi-community level connection. Okay, so this wouldn't just be something I did in first grade then. This would be something that involved my entire district or multiple partners. And then 7.2, demonstrate the effective use of professional learning communities in your school. Now, how do you demonstrate that? Well, describe the process. How often do they meet? Who leads them? Is there an agenda? How long do they meet? What do they focus on? Is it student learning materials? Is it developing feedback items, assessment items? What is the work of your professional learning community? So demonstrate that. Then part 8 is the assessments and monitoring. And just ask you straightforward. Describe your data collection and analysis process. And I love this phrase, the analysis habits of your school, of each school within the identified feeder system. Wow. Not just, yes, we collect data and we sit down once a month and we look at it all. No, we want you to describe the habit. So how often are you using it? And is it a habit of collection, analysis, and feedback and change? What is that feedback, that analysis loop that you're doing? Because if you don't analyze the data, it means nothing. And it's just a bunch of numbers. You need to know where the areas of good and the gaps both are. 8.2, I believe, that next one, provide with specific measures used in each identified school and agency and how those measures are used. So again, describing the current thing that's going on. And be as specific with that as you can. All right. So let's look at the budget and let's talk about that for a little while. That'll help us kind of round out our day, I think. There are 2 parts to your budget. One is the set of 5 criteria listed on page 13. And we're going to go through those a little bit. And the other is the budget form, which is found on page something. I will find it. Not at the moment, but I will find it. Let's see. We're looking at page 19. Okay. So hold a finger on your page 13 and your page 19. Okay. And we're going to be looking at that. So how do you write a budget about a program that you don't know about yet? That is a great question. And you know, when this proposal was being written, that was upcoming, and we kept going over that and over it and over it. Okay, so we either have to require the schools and districts to choose their products and their programs and to design their literacy plan between January and March, or we need to put that off and allow the districts to just tell us if they're capable of developing a plan, and then we'll help them. And we chose the latter because it's easier for you. So our choosing not to have you choose programs and things to purchase is very deliberate. It is to help you to think solely and very focused, in a very focused manner, on your community, on your partners, on your schools, and what your literacy needs are first. Then in the spring, we're going to think about the budget. Okay, but wait a minute, Donna. You just said, though, that I have to describe it. Well, yeah, you do. So let's go to page 13. In looking at these, let me see where this is going here. Okay. In looking at these criteria then on page 13, the first one, which would be 9.1, yes, you're going to write something about the budget. You're going to demonstrate the district's ability to provide sufficient fiscal oversight. So how do you provide fiscal oversight? Well, you probably have a finance director, right? So I would probably put a couple of things here. I would go to my finance director and I would say, hey, can you help me answer this? And he's going to say, well, we have a purchase order process. I look over all the things. We have signatory authority. We never purchase anything unless it's on the bids list. And that's whatever all those things are, what those are. How often is the budget reviewed with a program person, for example? 9.2, describe the district's methods for determining reasonable costs. Okay, so do employees at your agency just go out and buy things on Amazon? I'm pretty sure they don't. I'm pretty sure there's a process there where they get authorization, and they if it's a big something, they have to get 2 or 3 bids. If it's a little something, well, they still have to get it approved. So you'll talk about that. The third one, so 9.3, describe the district's methods of assuring all expenditures for grant and other initiatives are clearly connected to both the need and the intended result. This might be where you describe who the local person is that's going to be helping implement this. Maybe a district person, maybe somebody out of finance who's helping you with that. But how are you going to ensure that the things you are purchasing are directly aligned to this project? Again, talk to your finance person. You may also want to go talk to someone else who's operating with federal monies to see how they do it. But somebody's doing this already. Don't recreate the wheel here for answering that question. Number 4, describe historic support, coordination, and alignment of programs. This is the one we mentioned earlier, and we parsed that sentence. So what have you been doing in the past? The same thing here. You want to discuss what you've already done to align your funding and resources to your current literacy structures. Oh, and then we come to 9.5, okay? And this is the one where we really are just going to do our best to write a detailed budget. Okay? What the heck do I mean by that? Well, 9.5 says, include a detailed budget narrative explaining the specific use of funds. Okay, so flip over to page 19. This is your detailed budget narrative. This is where you're going to put this information. And this is just a table. You can expand this out. You can write as much as you want to in these spaces, and you can provide some detail for that. I'm going to show you an example or two in just a moment. But what do you put here if you don't know what you're going to buy? Well, you sure do know what you're going to buy. You know what you're going to do. You just don't know what the name of the program is yet. But you do know that a great deal of your funds are going to be spent on professional learning. Okay, so on a piece of scratch paper somewhere, just write down professional learning. You also may be thinking about whether you're going to hire a coach to help you with this work. Okay, so you might want to jot down coach. I'm pretty sure too that you're going to need travel to some of these regional training events for a good number of your teachers. Okay, so I think you should put down a mileage and travel line for teachers and other community partners. I know. So again, as you're thinking of all these things, jot those down, and you're going to figure out how to put the detail in. For example, that 16% that you need to pay for or need to be expending funds for birth to K, it could be that you're going to pay for some specific professional learning for all of your preschool. Now, you may look at that approved list and decide, we do need to have that halftime coach come in here, or that 50% coach come in here and do this, this, and this. It could be that as part of your needs assessment, you do an environmental, in preschool, we're always looking for the environment. You do that environmental review or inventory of early literacy materials to see what's missing. And then you spend funds on that. So I'm pretty darn sure you're going to purchase some kind of books, puppets, materials, dump trucks, I don't know, whatever it is that you need to help your preschool have the learning they need. And that's going to be stuff. Okay? So there's a spending item. So then after you've made this list of things you think you're going to purchase, you're going to come back in and you're going to provide the detail. And yes, it's an estimate. And yes, it will be wrong. But let me tell you something else. Every budget you've ever written in your entire life, with rare exception, has been wrong. I have helped people spend millions of dollars, and I have yet to get the fringe benefit cost correct on any single grant, ever, period. So we have to kind of get rid of some guilt in advance on this. It's going to need to be adjusted. Okay? What we're looking for in this section, for what the readers are looking for, is that you're smart enough to know how to budget, and you've been thoughtful about what you're likely to need. Okay? So you need professional learning. And no, you don't know yet what CCLD costs or what the adolescent literacy project costs, but you kind of know that you've got 100 school teachers, and 100 school teachers are about to get professional learning. And you kind of know that, you're going to have to send in year one 30%, 25 to 30% of your teachers to 2 days of training in the summer. And so there's going to be mileage and 2 days of PD. I think you're smart enough to make an estimate on that. And you just provide the detail related to that estimate. Then you do it for the rest of the year. And you only have to do 1 year budget. We just want to see that you've been thoughtful. Okay, so a strong, detailed budget will include some things about mileage for these regional trainings. It will include some things about professional learning, about purchasing stuff for early learning, about purchasing supplies for implementing the work. Will it be as detailed as, I don't know, an after-school program grant with 21st Century? No. But you do have an opportunity here to block out some categories of spending that you think you'll need. One thing I haven't mentioned are stipends. Because your teachers will be going to trainings in the summer, you may need to have some stipend money set aside. You may also need, I haven't mentioned this to Jackie, the word substitute didn't come up, but if we have teachers who are leaving the district to go do the monitoring or to have professional learning, there will be substitutes. Is that a good use of funds? She's nodding, so I think we're good there.
I thought you were being rhetorical at first. Yes.
No, yes. I just want to make sure, because it didn't come up all day yesterday. I'm like, okay.
That's true.
All right, so again, in July and June, when your district literacy plan is designed and approved, you're not going to start from scratch, but you're going to take this budget, you're going to kind of take a big old thing of whiteout and fix it. Okay, Katie is going to work with you on that. You're going to make those changes, and you're going to put in specific programs that now meet the needs of your schools and districts. This is where I also want to mention, as Jackie did earlier, excuse me, there is a group that is planning a training for next week, excuse me, on interventions and on how to design your grant. I just want to mention to you that, again, this grant is not about purchasing stuff. This grant is about your district plan. Okay, so vagueness in your budget in terms of specific materials is okay. How you come about, how you present that could be a little more specific. We want to know that you've thought that through. Okay? Let me give you a scenario. I talk about this scenario all the time. My father was 93 years old when he passed away a couple of years ago. He was a teenager during the Depression. If I went to him and I asked him for $50 for the weekend, there'd be no way in heck I'd get that money. But if I went to him with a specific plan with some categories of funding that align to his needs, I'm getting it. Let me give you an example. If my friend Vicki and I go to my dad and I say, "Dad, can I have $50? I'm going to meet Vicki on Saturday morning at Denny's for a last-minute study session on the ACT. And when we're done with our study session, then we're going to drive over to the university, and I need $10 for gas. We're going to drive over to the university, and we're going to take the exam. I still owe $10 on the exam fee as well. And then after that, we're going to go to the university center and maybe buy a T-shirt to celebrate, and then we're going to have lunch, and then I'll be home by 1 o'clock. But Dad, can I have $50? I'm a lot more likely to get that because it's obvious that vague and non-specific plan is going to align to what my dad needs. It's got all those components. It's got my professional learning with my friend Vicki at Denny's. It's got the implementation, which could be, the implementation of that PD, your monitoring. It's got all that stuff in it that you're going to do without having necessarily that you're going to buy XYZ program. Okay. So let me give you an example of what that looks like. Let me go through that. Okay. Again, your budget form doesn't count against your page limit. You do want to explain your rates for mileage, the number of items if you're purchasing, if you've got days of, give an estimate. Your estimate, you're going to be allowed to change that in June. And don't put anything weird, okay? Don't put anything weird in there. Just, I'm going to leave it at that. You know what weird is. And let's talk about matching funds. Now, on your page 19, matching funds are not required, but there is a column there. Okay? And throughout the RFA, you should have felt your need to bring something to the party, that your resources and your capacity were cared about. Well, no more so than the amount of matching funds. So as you go through, you're going to want to talk about how you're going to do that. I've never been involved in a grant that did not require some type of matching to be done. It shows your commitment to the project and that you have some capacity for success. It's also doable. Everybody brings match. Everybody. Okay. So let me give you an example. Let's say that you're going to have professional learning for your teachers, and you're going to be operating those PLCs in the afternoon. Well, we aren't providing any stipends for that PLC work. So some of that teacher time, you might think about that. I wouldn't go crazy on that. That was probably a bad example. But your principals are also going to be providing their input. Your preschool is going to be providing input. There will be places for you to add that type of match. And I just want to give you an example of how I do this. So for example, if I was doing something on out of district mileage, and this is something, again, every summer you're going to have professional learning and teachers are going to go to it. Okay? It's likely that it will be in a regional event. We have suggested that you make it 100 or 150 miles round trip. So for example, if you live in the Louisville area, it's likely that one of the trainings is going to be near you. If you live in Bug Tussle, which is over in Monroe County, you're probably going to have a training in either Elizabethtown or Grec, in the Grec region, so over in Bowling Green. Okay, so just kind of figure out a general set of mileage and how many people you're going to have going to that, and then how much is mileage. Right now it's 40 cents a mile, I think. And then on your match, here's a better example than what I had before. Our district instructional coordinator will also participate in the 3 training sessions, and so their mileage will be contributed in kind. And you'll notice that I put, as I block out the dollar amounts, one will go in one column and one will go in the other. Okay. The people who will review your proposal will know in advance that this will not be perfect. But what they're looking for, or will be looking for, is that, again, is that you've been thoughtful, okay? And that you have the capacity to implement a good grant program. You know what a budget is, and you've done one before. So it will have some detail. The rest of it you'll figure out as you go, and with KDE's help. Jackie, did you have a question, a statement?
No, I just was fixing something.
Okay. Okay, good deal. All right, so and we're almost done. In meeting your deadline, I always advise that you know who's in charge and know who's really in charge, okay? Yes, your school superintendent should be, your district superintendent should be at the table, but you probably have a set of worker bees who are already working on it really hard. Make sure you have everybody in a row. Find out if there's an internal review system. Some school districts have a very strict review system, even to the point of having a potential proposal being passed by the board. Now, there was a tongue twister, potential proposal passed by the board. Okay, so make sure you know what the process is before you go off. It'd be really sad for you to get in trouble because you wrote a grant that won. That'd be awful. So just make sure you've got that in place. Also look at the deadline. Now, you're very fortunate. You don't have any holidays between now and March 2nd. You've got a month. You've got a short month because it's February. But you also might have snow days. What do you need to do and by when? Okay, so for me, I go out and block this all out. I know by when I need to be doing some serious writing. Okay, so 2 weeks before that March deadline, we need to have everything decided. Who are our partners? And people need to be going out and getting those letters. And then somebody needs to start in drafting that text for that. Then who's gonna edit? Okay, and when is that going to happen? So just get a big calendar out and fill it in from the deadline date forward, or to here, backwards. And make sure you know all the things that are going to happen between now and then. And then also figure a couple of snow days in there because they're going to happen. They will. In the next 5 days, know who's going to do that work. Okay? I can't say that strongly enough. Especially if you're with a team of people, know who's going to do which parts of that work. And make sure it's clear to everybody. Otherwise, it won't happen. We all know that. Unless somebody's name's decided, it doesn't happen. So make sure you make those decisions as early as possible. Your additional assistance, again, those online technical sessions, February 8th at 10 o'clock Eastern, February 15th at 11 o'clock Eastern, and on February 22nd at 2 o'clock Eastern. I think the plan is that those sessions will last an hour. They will be online with Skype, and you'll be able to click on a link and jump in there. Yes, Jackie?
Yeah, I think I'm actually going to make it 90 minutes just in case. And
Okay.
Obviously you can always email. And anyway, we're here to help.
That's right. The questions for those, when you do have questions, send those to the KDE RFP email, and those will be answered through February 23rd. After that, that's kind of that purgatory. You're not gonna get your questions answered after that point. I would also urge you again to be cautious about where you get your answers. The official answers aren't from Jonna. They're not from a vendor. They're from KDE. So be careful that you listen to the right folks. Those of you who've been around grants before know that sometimes it can be a little crazy. The real answers on this come from KDE. All right, and we're just going to wrap up. Jackie?
Did anyone have any last minute questions? Anything else you'd like to talk about? I don't see any more in the chat box, but again, remember you can send questions, come to the Q&A session. Hope we may be live, I hope, in Bowling Green also on Monday. Hopefully it doesn't snow. And this webinar will be made available. Paul said, Paul said we've given him a lot to think about. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And just let us know if you're thinking, lead you to a question, Paul, or any of you.
Right.
Jonathan,
thank you all
so much. I appreciate you. Oh,
no
Jeff,
problem. I'll see you Monday.
Jeff will definitely make this webinar available very soon, and that'll be there for you. Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, Donna and Jackie, I'm going to stop the recording now.
Okay.